The early June heat of 2023 began with an unusual disturbance on the narrow forest road leading into the town of Conway, New Hampshire. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest wooden house standing isolated amid dense pine forest. The few neighbors peered through their curtains as officers in tactical jackets fanned out, silently sealing off the area. Inside, Thomas Laird, 65 years old, was preparing his morning coffee, a routine he had maintained for more than 30 years since retiring from truck driving and living a quiet, almost forgotten life. A sharp knock came at the door at 6:42 a.m. Thomas Laird, Maine State Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1991 Ashford Hollow massacre." The officers later recalled that as he set the coffee cup down on the table, his hand trembled slightly, but his face remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for more than 3 decades. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. Ashford Hollow, a small town nestled deep in the pine forest of Somerset County, Maine, where the snow-covered road year-round had only one gas station, one church, and a few dozen wooden houses clustered along the shore of Moosehead Lake. The winter of 1991 arrived early and fiercely, with snow falling so heavily that it swallowed all sound, making the town seem cut off from the outside world. In that setting lived the Calderon family, Edward, 45, owner of a small sawmill, his wife Ruth, 42, an elementary school teacher, and their only daughter Lila, 19, a freshman at the University of Bangor, home for winter break. They resided in what was known as the Ashford compound, consisting of 17 people from 4 close-knit families, most of whom worked in logging and lived a self-sufficient life on the edge of the forest. Since the previous fall, tension had developed between Edward Calderon and Samuel Sarin, a wealthy businessman who owned the largest lumber mill in the region. Sarin wanted to buy the forested land bordering the lake that Edward held, a prime timber area, but Edward refused, insisting the land belonged to the community. Rumors spread throughout the town that Sarin was displeased, while Edward became withdrawn and avoided meetings. On December 21, 1991, Maine was under a forecast for the biggest blizzard of the decade. In the morning, Lila helped her mother prepare food and organize relief supplies for compound residents. By afternoon, snow began falling, winds howled, and power flickered. Around 7:10 p.m., neighbor Eileen Frost saw Lila carrying a basket of bread toward the community hall, saying she would be right back. That was the last time anyone saw her. At 9:15 p.m., with snow now covering the road completely, Eileen looked out her window and saw the headlights of a truck stop in front of the Calderon house for a few minutes before disappearing into the white wind. Then the storm hit full force, and the town plunged into darkness. The morning of December 22nd, the sky was thick gray and bitterly cold, snow piled up to knee level. When the wind died down, Eileen went to the Calderon house to check and found the entire compound empty, doors left ajar, no one present, and no sign they had left. All 17 people in the community had vanished. The next morning, December 23, 1991, at 7:42 a.m., Eileen Frost called the Somerset County Sheriff's Dispatch, her voice trembling. 17 people, they're not here anymore. The call was immediately transferred to the main desk. In the stillness of the winter morning, only static and the dry clack of keys could be heard as the dispatcher took down the report. The information was then forwarded to the North Division Regional Command, marked Urgent Group Scale, require on-site verification. At 8:10 a.m., Lieutenant Robert Halden received the report. He was in his small office at the Somerset Sheriff's Department. The glass door frosted over, dim light filtering through thick ice buildup. The initial report was only 4 lines long. Ashford Hollow, community of 17 persons, absent from residence, adverse weather conditions, information from sole witness, Eileen Frost. Halden read it repeatedly, feeling a vague sense that this was either an accident or something far more unusual. He had handled dozens of individual missing persons cases in the Maine woods, but never one where an entire community disappeared at once. He stood, put on his coat, and walked into the command room, where an area map still hung on the wall, with old search routes marked from the previous year. Halden circled the Ashford Hollow area in red ink and wrote, "Possible mass disappearance." 10 minutes later, he signed off on opening a temporary case file, code Ashford Missing Persons 91 Tiers 1221. Below the case number, he handwritten, "Verify scene" before assuming criminality. The emergency response team was assembled right in the yard. 6 people, 3 patrol officers, 2 snow rescue personnel, and 1 forensic technician carrying a Polaroid camera and scene documentation kit. Halden checked the terrain map, Route 15 to Greenville, then turned into Ashford Hollow, a nearly 30-mile stretch, the final part being Forest Road now buried under heavy snow. He requested contact with the transportation department to send a plow truck ahead. Outside, snow continued falling relentlessly, the sky a thick, suffocating gray, every sound swallowed by the freezing air. At 9 a.m., Halden received the go-ahead order from the chief's office with a single instruction: move early before roads close. He climbed into patrol vehicle 11A, quickly noting in his log, 9:05, depart headquarters. Behind him were 2 small trucks carrying personnel and equipment. As the convoy left Greenville, snow was already nearly half a meter deep, strong winds reducing visibility to under 50 meters. Halden maintained radio contact, voice steady and concise, maintained 3-vehicle spacing, slow speed, no stopping unless ordered. The road into Ashford Hollow was almost completely buried, fallen trees blocking the way, road signs obscured. It took nearly 2 hours to reach the small turnoff leading to the compound. The dashboard clock read 11:43 a.m. There, Halden ordered a stop, stepped out, checked wind direction, then pointed toward the faint line of pines in the blowing snow. The houses are about a mile northwest. He marked the coordinates on the map and ordered the team to prepare for approach. Officers pulled on cold weather gear, checked radios, sidearms, and flashlights. The silence was unnaturally heavy, broken only by engine noise and metal clinking. The group moved slowly, plow truck leading, patrol vehicles following. When they reached the first clearing of the residential area, they saw a low wooden fence and a small sign on a post, barely legible: Ashford Community, 1974. No tire tracks, no footprints of humans or animals. The snow surface was perfectly smooth. Halden raised a hand to signal advance. The first house on the left was dark wood, snow piled thick on the sloped roof, front door ajar. He pushed the door open, the hinges gave a dry creak. Inside, the temperature was nearly the same as outside. Everything remained untouched: dining table, wooden chairs, a coat hanging behind the door, a porcelain cup upside down on the kitchen counter. No signs of ransacking or struggle. Halden moved slowly, eyes scanning the room, jotting quickly in his notebook. House #1, no signs of forced entry, belongings intact, unoccupied. He signaled the technician to photograph, marking the front door and windows. As they stepped outside, strong gusts lifted layers of surface snow. They moved to the second house, belonging to the Harrow family. The door was locked. Halden used a tool to open it. Flashlight swept across the dark hallway, wood dust floating in the air. Gas stove off, firewood in the hearth, cold. On the table sat 2 glass tumblers, one still containing a thin frozen layer of liquid. On the wall shelf, the clock had stopped at 9:23. He noted, House #2, no forced entry, daily life interrupted. Inspection of the next 2 houses behind yielded the same doors ajar, belongings untouched, beds neatly made, food still in refrigerators, not yet spoiled, indicating sudden departure without preparation. By noon, the team had surveyed all 17 houses in the compound. No blood, no missing items, no signs of structural collapse from weather. Snow lay evenly over every surface, proving no one had entered or exited since before the blizzard began. Halden stood in the center of the open yard, gazing toward the western tree line, where Caldera Lake lay silent behind a veil of mist. He added to his notebook, all residents absent, no evidence of intentional departure. The forensic technician completed overall photography, created a site diagram, and labeled each house. One officer checked the horse barn behind, finding the gate unlocked, interior empty, stalls clean, no manure or leftover feed, no animals, no people, he reported over radio, voice strained from the cold. Halden nodded and recorded it. At 1:15 p.m., he ordered a temporary command post set up in the center of the compound, tarps stretched between two vehicles to block wind. One officer set up a small generator, connecting long-range radio to Somerset headquarters. Halden sat at a folding table, spread out the map, marked each house's location in red, and drew search zone boundaries. He then took the microphone, voice low and even as he read the preliminary report to command. Investigation team reached Ashford compound at 11:58. All 17 residences inspected. No evidence of force or unauthorized entry. No bodies, no items noted missing. Area completely snow-covered. No fresh movement tracks. Recommend expanded search within 2-mile radius of compound center. Situation currently undetermined. The reply through radio static was brief. Report received. Continue verification. Send images when conditions allow. Halden lowered the mic, slowly looked up for one final observation. Wind swirled fine snow around the wooden roofs, the pale gray midday light, making the scene appear frozen in an unfinished moment. He closed his notebook, pocketed his pen, and signaled the team to split up and check the forest edge and surrounding trails. Though all indicators were normal, Halden clearly felt that the silence at Ashford was heavier than the storm that had just passed, as if the place were holding on to something it refused to reveal. By early afternoon on December 23, 1991, shortly after the preliminary report reached Somerset, command upgraded the scene handling level and dispatched an additional criminal forensics team for support. Around 2:30 p.m., the forensics van marked Forensics Unit 05 slowly entered Ashford compound, its tires crushing the snow already disturbed by earlier footprints. 3 technicians in silver-gray protective suits stepped out, carrying cameras, evidence collection bags, and scene documentation kits. Halden met them at the temporary staging area, quickly briefed them on developments, pointed out previously checked areas, and stressed the need to document even the smallest anomalies. The weather remained brutally cold, snow drifting in the air like endless fine dust, and as daylight began to fade, all examination work had to rely on portable floodlights, signaling the official start of in-depth scene investigation. The forensics team split into 2 groups, one photographing the overall Calderon house and pathways, the other searching areas near the southern fence. About 15 minutes later, Technician Anderson called Halden over to see something near the front steps of the Calderon house, a small piece of red fabric, frozen hard into the ice, about 2 inches in size. Anderson removed it with tweezers, placed it in an evidence bag, labeled E01. Halden noted, red fabric, location in front of main door, possibly clothing fiber. As they entered the house for detailed photography, another technician found on the desk by the window a desk calendar turned to December 21st with a red circle around the words, Saren's visit, 8 p.m. The red ink, still fresh, written in ballpoint pen with a right-leaning slant. Halden leaned in, stared silently for a few seconds, then signaled for close-up photos before gloving up and placing the calendar in a second evidence bag, labeled E02. He said nothing, only wrote in his notebook, calendar notes Saren, timing matches night of disappearance. Additionally, they collected a few small items for trace analysis, a glass with condensation residue, several fallen hairs on a chair, all properly sealed. After finishing inside the house, the team continued checking outside the compound, following trails into the woods. Thick snow and strong wind made finding traces difficult, but near the eastern fence line, a technician spotted a small metal object protruding from the snow, a damp cigarette butt with faint lipstick marks. Halden ordered it collected, coded E03. All samples were photographed, with GPS coordinates and collection times recorded. By nearly 4 p.m., a complete evidence list of 8 items was compiled, the most significant being the red fabric and the calendar note. Halden ordered samples packaged to cold storage standards and transported to the Somerset lab that same night. He then worked with an assistant to compile the missing persons list from local residency records, 17 people total, 4 Maine families, and 3 single individuals. The list was numbered sequentially, with age, occupation, and relationships noted. Halden made a separate note next to Lila Calderon, last person seen. He rechecked house-by-house logs, confirming nothing had been taken. All personal vehicles, trucks, pickups, snowmobiles, remained on site, keys still hanging inside. This ruled out voluntary departure. Halden ordered VIN and engine number checks on each vehicle to verify registration matches. Initial verification showed no discrepancies. He stepped out into the center of the compound, looking at the neatly parked snow-covered vehicles, thinking to himself that it was impossible for all 17 people to have left without using any of them. At 5:10 p.m., Halden completed the initial scene report, no evidence of force, no items missing. Evidence collected: red fabric, calendar noting sarin meeting, cigarette butt, glass tumbler, hair fiber samples. Full list of 17 missing persons confirmed. All personal vehicles remain at compound. No signs of use within past 48 hours. The report was transmitted via secure radio to headquarters before full darkness fell. As the last light faded, Halden stood beside his vehicle, watching the dim glow from the mobile station reflect across the cold snow, one single thought in his mind: something here is wrong, and those silent houses are hiding a secret the snow cannot cover forever. On the evening of December 23, 1991, after evidence collection was completed, Halden had a temporary workstation set up inside the Harrow family home, using it as the witness statement recording point. The first person invited was Eileen Frost, the only witness who had proactively reported the disappearance. She was about 58, thin, her face weathered by cold wind, escorted by an officer from her house, south of the lake. When she entered the room, Eileen still appeared disoriented, her hands tightly gripping snow-wet wool gloves. Halden sat across from her, turned on the recorder, briefly explained procedure, then asked, "Can you describe exactly what you saw on the evening of December 21st? Eileen nodded, voice hoarse from the cold. She said that around 7:10 p.m., she saw Lila Calderon cross the yard, carrying a bread basket, waving through the window. The lights in the Calderon house were still on at that time. Around 9:15 p.m., as the blizzard intensified, she stood in her kitchen, looked through the north window, and saw headlights of a truck stop in front of the Calderon house. The headlights were very bright, yellow large vehicle. I'd guess a 6-wheel truck, similar to the kind Sarin has," she said slowly. She couldn't hear the engine clearly because of the howling wind, only saw the light shine for a while before going out. After that, the sky turned solid white, and she saw nothing more. Halden asked about the truck's direction. Eileen confirmed it appeared from the main road and vanished with the storm. She didn't recall a license plate, but was certain it was a black box truck, the type usually used for hauling lumber. Halden noted the detail carefully, underlining the name Sarin. After Eileen left, Halden directed officers to sweep the surrounding residential area for anyone else who might have heard or seen anything. Around 10 p.m., but they brought in a new witness, Raymond Keene, 62, owner of a small hunting camp about 2 miles east of Ashford Hollow. He reported that during the storm, around 9:30 p.m., while inside his house, he heard a loud metallic crashing sound, followed by a fading engine noise, possibly a vehicle moving slowly through the forest area near the lake. He assumed someone had gotten lost in the storm and didn't pay much attention. Halden asked for the direction of the sound. Keene pointed northwest, matching the compound's direction. He also confirmed hearing nothing further afterward. All information was carefully recorded in the log, with witness signatures attached. After obtaining both statements, Halden worked with the technician to compile a preliminary timeline for cross-referencing. Key time frame fell between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. on December 21st. 7:10 p.m., Lila last seen leaving home, 9:15 p.m. Black truck stops in front of Calderon House, 9:30 p.m. Metallic sound in eastern forest, after which no further activity signals from compound. All points occurred within the 3 hours before the blizzard peaked. Halden marked the 9 o'clock, 9:30 p.m. window in red ink in his notebook, noting time frame of critical event. He ordered the technician to prepare an updated report for Maine State Police headquarters, including evidence list, timeline, and witness statements. The report was drafted that night, with details sequentially numbered, condensed into 4 pages, page 1 scene summary. Page 2 evidence details. Page 3 Eileen Frost statement. Page 4 consolidated timeline. At 11:45 p.m., Halden faxed the report via secure line to the main headquarters in Augusta. Outside, snow had stopped falling, but wind still sliced through the roof gaps in gusts. He folded the backup copy, placed it in the case file, then stepped onto the porch, looking at the silent row of wooden houses. Light from the generator cast long streaks across the cold snow, reflecting newly made footprints. For the first time in the Ashford case file, a specific name had emerged: Samuel Sarin, along with a time window that could not be ignored, from 7 o'clock in the evening until 10 o'clock at night, the night the entire community vanished. On the morning of December 24, 1991, when the statement report was forwarded to the state police headquarters, Halden received instructions to expand the search around the Moosehead Lake area. At 7 a.m., he gathered the entire team at the Ashford Compound Center, divided them into groups, and assigned specific tasks. The first group consisted of 3 officers, accompanied by 2 K9 police dogs, borrowed from Greenville, tasked with sweeping the western forest and the Caldera Lake shoreline. The second group included 2 snow rescue personnel, coordinating with the Somerset County helicopter team, departing from Greenville Municipal Airfield to conduct aerial sweeps in a 2-mile radius around the compound. Before leaving, Halden instructed over the radio, "Do not stray far from the main path. Maintain continuous contact every 10 minutes." That morning the temperature dropped to -18, with strong northwest winds, making movement slow and difficult. The K9 team took the lead. The 2 German shepherds sniffed along old trails, occasionally pausing, barking softly, then continuing. The smell of ice and rotting wood muddled all traces, but near mid-morning, one of the dogs stopped at the edge of the northern fence line, its nose pressed against a patch of snow that was more compacted than the surrounding area. The accompanying technician knelt down, used a small shovel to remove the thin ice layer, and discovered a deep circular groove in the ground beneath, tire tracks from a large truck, running parallel westward and extending into the dense forest. Halden was called over. He knelt to examine the remaining imprint. The depth and axle spacing indicated a 6-wheeled vehicle. He noted in his pad, motor vehicle tire tracks, westbound, possibly matching Sarin's truck. The technician photographed the spot and marked the GPS coordinates, placing small yellow flags in the snow. A thin layer of fresh snow had covered the tracks, indicating they were formed before the storm peaked, most likely during the night of the 21st into the early morning of the 22nd. Halden ordered the K9 team to follow the tire tracks. But after only a few hundred meters, the trail disappeared completely under thicker snow in a low-lying area where wind had created a hard crust. The dogs lost the scent, circled a few times, then stopped and gave short barks. No unusual odor, no human scent detected. At the same time, the helicopter reported no heat signatures, no smoke, no activity. Caldera Lake surface completely frozen. Halden took the radio and requested they descend to 200 feet to check the shoreline. From above, the camera captured a long dark streak along the edge of the ice, resembling a deep groove, possibly made by tires or a heavy object being dragged. The pilot read out the coordinates. Halden marked them on the map, only a little over half a mile from the compound. Near noon, he led a team to the location. Snow was thick there, wind howling through the pine rows with a prolonged whistling sound. Upon arrival, they observed faint cracking on the ice surface near the water's edge. Covered by a fresh layer of snow, the technician bent down to inspect and confirmed this was indeed the track of a motorized vehicle that had moved right up to the lake, with tire impressions nearly a foot deep before being sealed over by ice. Halden recorded, "Tire tracks end at lake edge, no turnaround, no human footprints." Possible vehicle proceeded onto the lake and stopped. He looked around, only motionless rows of trees and thin mist drifting across the water. No floating objects. No signs of broken ice, no other evidence of human activity. The 2 canine dogs were released to search the area, but only circled a few times before returning without any particular reaction. Halden ordered snow and soil samples collected from the ice edge for oil fuel testing and had the entire scene photographed. At 1:20 p.m., he radioed, "Identified truck tire tracks terminating at Caldera Lake edge. No signs of continued movement, no signs of life." The overhead helicopter confirmed the visual match. No unusual movement on the ice surface. After nearly 6 hours of continuous searching, the entire team returned to Ashford compound in silence. The sky began to turn dark gray again. The cold so sharp it felt like needles, coating their clothing with a thin layer of ice. Halden looked at the map again, traced the tire tracks and lake area with red pen, then folded it and put it back in his pocket. In that day's duty log, the final entry consisted of only 8 words, "No signs of life around Caldera Lake." On the afternoon of December 24, 1991, after completing the search around Caldera Lake and confirming no signs of life, Halden returned to the temporary command post in the compound to finalize the report. While reviewing the timeline and statements again, he paused at the entry. Saren's visit, 8 p.m. on the calendar, recovered from the Calderan house. Combined with Eileen Frost's statement about the black truck, this detail convinced him he needed to deal directly with Samuel Saren, the only person mentioned in any of the victim's documents. At 8 p.m., Halden called the Somerset County District Attorney's Office to request an emergency subpoena for witness questioning. At 9:15 p.m., he and one officer drove south from Ashford Hollow toward the town of Millinocket, where Saren lived. Light snow was falling. The road was almost deserted, headlights reflecting in long streaks on the ice. They arrived after 11 p.m. The lights were still on in Saren's wooden mansion. Halden knocked, showed his badge, and stated the reason. Saren, 58 years old, tall, wearing a thick fur robe, remained calm, but his eyes were cold. In the living room, the heavy smell of whiskey and cigarette smoke lingered. Halden opened his notebook and asked directly, "On the evening of December 21st, did you visit the Ashford Hollow area?" Saren raised an eyebrow and answered slowly, "No, I had a severe cold and stayed home all day. My private nurse, Mrs. Malone, can confirm. I didn't leave the house." Halden asked further if he had any appointment with Edward Calderon. The reply was curt, "No, we had nothing to discuss." His tone was dry, emotionless. Halden took notes and glanced around the room. On a shelf he noticed a small black truck model, a 6-wheeled Freightliner, the same type Eileen had described. He asked, "Is that truck of yours still in use?" Saren replied, "Yes, but it hasn't moved in the past week because I've been sick." Halden noted it down and requested to see the vehicle. Saren hesitated, then led him to the rear garage. The door opened to reveal a real black truck inside, its body still covered with dried mud, license plate obscured by ice, he explained. "It's used for hauling materials. It's been parked here the whole time. The mud is probably from the last trip into the woods early last month." Halden bent down to inspect the tires. The ice coating was uneven, and one tire had a small crack at the edge. He shone a flashlight under the chassis, but found nothing conclusive, though a few small frozen blades of grass still clung to the rear mud flap. He wrote in his notebook, 6X4 black truck, travel unverified, condition inconsistent with current weather. Back inside, Halden requested a formal statement. Saren sat down, maintaining his composure, and repeated that he was seriously ill with a nurse present from 6 p.m. until midnight. Mrs. Malone was called in and confirmed, "Mr. Saren had a high fever. I was here the entire evening. I have the medication log and thermometer readings." Halden asked to see it. She provided the log showing temperature readings at 19:30, 21 o'clock, and 23 o'clock, all above 38 degrees Celsius. He copied the figures, but noted the handwriting showed two different pen strokes. Halden made no comment, only jotting temperature and time entries inconsistent. He asked, "Anyone else who can corroborate?" Saren answered, "No one. I didn't receive visitors. The truck was locked the whole time." Halden closed his notebook, stated that the interview was paused here, and that the information would be verified through medical records. As he left the house, the clock read 12:45 a.m. He paused and looked back through the window. Saren stood inside staring out, face expressionless. On the drive back, Halden radioed headquarters, statement taken from Samuel Saren. He claims he did not leave home on the night of the 21st. Nurse provides corroboration, request verification of schedule, medication log, and registration of black Freightliner truck, plate 7C412. The next morning, December 25th, Somerset Police received initial verification results. The local hospital had no record of Saren being admitted or examined on the 21st or 22nd. Nurse Malone's medication log was written by her alone, with no physician's countersignature. This information was added to the file. Halden prepared a request for a search warrant on the truck to examine tires and undercarriage for comparison with the Caldera Lake tracks. However, the on-duty county prosecutor denied it, stating, "Insufficient probable cause for criminal matter, only circumstantial statements." The warrant was rejected. Halden noted in the file, "Truck search request denied, awaiting additional evidence." He compiled a summary report to the Somerset County DA that afternoon, titled, "Potential Person of Interest, Samuel Saren." It clearly outlined the discrepancies between physical evidence and Saren's and the nurse's statements. At the end, Halden added a personal observation: temporal and vehicle matches should be considered high-level suspicion, but lack sufficient legal grounds to expand investigation. The report was signed at 6:20 p.m. and sent via secure fax to the DA's office. As Christmas night blanketed the town, Halden sat alone in the command post, staring at the Caldera Lake map on the table, the red lines he had drawn the previous day now blurred under the dim light. Outside, snow fell gently, and the deep forest silence seemed to hold everything frozen between 2 days. An unsolved mass disappearance, and a name beginning to take shape in his mind: Samuel Saren. On December 26, 1991, while the Maine sky remained shrouded in the dull gray of late-year snow, Lieutenant Robert Halden returned to the temporary office in Ashford compound to complete the initial case file on the disappearance. He sat at the metal desk, surrounded by stacks of reports, marked maps, and sealed evidence bags. On the table lay the list of 17 Ashford residents, each marked status missing. He reread the entire report from the beginning. Intact scene, no signs of struggle, belongings and vehicles untouched, no bodies, no blood, only scattered items, red fabric fragment, cigarette butt, calendar page with Saren's visit, 8 p.m. Witness statements led to no firm conclusion. Eileen Frost confirmed seeing a black truck parked in front of the Calderon house, but could not provide a plate number. Raymond Keene heard metallic sounds, but could not identify the source. Samuel Saren's and Nurse Malone's statements aligned, claiming he remained home on the night of December 21st, despite no official medical record confirmation. Halden organized the data into sections: physical evidence, witnesses, locations, timeline. The report, nearly 40 pages thick, was bound in a hardcover titled Ashford Hollow Investigation, Preliminary Summary. In the conclusion he wrote, "No direct evidence of criminal activity, no signs of conflict, coercion, or theft. Voluntary departure hypothesis not yet ruled out. The summary was sent to Maine State Police headquarters on the morning of December 27th. 2 days later, the official response arrived, only 3 lines. No criminal basis established. Case will not be elevated to state-level investigation. Recommend temporary closure per protocol. Below the electronic signature was the administrative note, status, no criminal indication. Halden read the sentence over and over, feeling hollow. He knew the case could not simply be a mass disappearance due to weather, yet every piece of evidence stopped short of certainty. In his duty log he wrote, all physical elements do not clearly indicate crime. However, the simultaneous absence of 17 people under extreme weather conditions, with no signs of departure, no vehicles leaving, no belongings taken, is inconsistent with voluntary behavior. That afternoon, Halden held a brief meeting with the criminal team and search personnel to announce the higher-ups' decision. The atmosphere was heavy. Technicians packed equipment, dismantled the mobile station, and retrieved generators. Outside, wind howled through the pines, snow-blanketed rooftops, nearly erasing the truck tracks. Before leaving, Halden walked one final loop around the compound. He stopped in front of the Calderon porch, looking at the red fabric fragment the team had marked earlier, now just a faint spot beneath ice. He activated the audio recorder and read the closing for the sound file. December 28, 1991. Conclusion of preliminary investigation phase, Ashford Hollow. No criminal evidence. Case temporarily closed. All evidence sealed and transferred to Somerset. His voice was steady, emotionless, but his hand gripped the notebook tightly in his pocket. He knew that in cases like this, without bodies, without signs of violence, every theory would be classified as unexplained disappearance. At 4:10 p.m., the convoy left Ashford Hollow. The icy road stretched silently ahead, forests on both sides completely white. Halden sat in the passenger seat, flipped open his notebook, reread his final entries, then added one line in pencil, disappearance pattern inconsistent with voluntary departure. He underlined it twice, closed the notebook, and stared out the window where snow continued to fall quietly, covering everything. For him, the Ashford case did not end. It was merely closed on paper. In his mind, those 17 names remained, suspended between cold case files that no agency wanted to reopen. In early 1995, 4 years after the Ashford Hollow file was temporarily closed with the note, no criminal indication, the case was officially placed in the Somerset County Unsolved Disappearance category, file number 91-1221. Among cases lacking criminal evidence, suspects or indications of crime. The classification document was signed on January 12, 1995, stamped by Maine State Police, stating clearly, no further investigative developments, no new witnesses identified, location of missing persons undetermined, file permanently classified, unsolved disappearance. That day, Lieutenant Robert Halden was present in Somerset to sign the evidence and document transfer protocol. In the evidence room, he stood looking at the sealed boxes labeled E01 through E08, containing the red fabric fragment, calendar page, cigarette butt, fiber sample, glass, hair, and scene photographs. Everything was sealed in moisture-proof bags, placed in white plastic bins, and labeled for storage. Per procedure, evidence without prosecutorial value was transferred to the central warehouse in Augusta, stored at a stable 10 degrees Celsius. Halden signed the transfer receipt and added beside his signature, all evidence pertaining to file 91-1221 transferred in full, no items missing. After signing, he stood silently for a long time, watching the department truck load the evidence boxes and slowly roll away across the snowy yard. In that moment, he knew he would never touch those small items again, the only fragile remnants that once held hope of uncovering the truth. After the handover, he returned to his office to pack personal files. On the desk remained only a photocopy of the summary report, 40 pages thick, boldly marked, case closed, no evidence of crime. He turned to the final page, where he himself had written in 1991, disappearance pattern inconsistent with voluntary departure. The pencil had smudged, but the words were still legible. Halden closed the file and placed it in a private drawer. On February 18, 1995, he officially submitted early retirement papers, citing health and personal reasons. The request was quickly approved. The farewell was simple, held in a small meeting room. A few colleagues shook his hand, mentioning the Ashford case as proof of his dedication. Though none truly believed there was anything left to pursue, Halden gave a faint smile and said briefly, "Not every disappearance ends. Sometimes they just grow quieter than the rest." After the gathering, he left with a small cardboard box containing several notebooks, old maps, and the audio recorder. He returned to his home on the outskirts of Fairfield and lived alone. In the garage, he kept the Moosehead Lake area map still hanging on the wall, its red lines marking the truck tracks, now faded over the years. That winter, Maine saw early snow again. Weather reports predicted a deep cold front, temperatures dropping below -20, reminiscent of 1991 nights. During the early days of retirement, Halden occasionally called the old office to ask about Ashford, always receiving the same reply: nothing new. By the end of 1995, Somerset Police sent him an archiving notice confirming that the entire Ashford Hollow file, evidence, and related reports had been fully transferred to the Augusta Central Warehouse. The notice listed 8 items, each a sealed box of records. Under Item 8, someone added the note, "Indefinite retention. Status, unsolved disappearance." Halden placed the paper in his personal file, folded it, and put it in a drawer. He never returned to the scene, but on snowy nights when wind blew through the forest across his roof, he still recalled the bone-chilling cold of his first step into the empty compound. The silence so thick it felt as though time itself had stopped. In Somerset, the Ashford case gradually faded from public memory, reduced to a dry code in the state's missing persons list. Media coverage ceased, investigation maps were rolled up and stored. 5 members of the initial response team transferred to other duties. In later years, when anyone asked about the case, people simply said, "There's nothing to tell." They vanished and never came back. In Augusta, the evidence boxes remained untouched on steel shelves, white labels, black marker numbers. No one opened them again, and in Fairfield, Halden still made coffee every morning, sat by the window, watching snow fall, his mind circling the old images, the empty Calderon house, the red-circled calendar entry, the snow-covered truck tracks. His case closed on paper, but in his thoughts, it had never truly ended. In March 2018, the local Somerset County News Bulletin ran a brief item on page 3. Businessman Samuel Sarin, 85, passed away at his residence after a prolonged illness. There was no formal obituary, only a few lines announcing a private funeral held on the grounds of his home in Millinocket, with attendance strictly limited. That name had scarcely appeared in records or newspapers for more than 27 years. But for those who remembered the Ashford Hollow case, the notice felt like the final period at the end of a story long buried. In Somerset, once the center of the 1991 investigation, no one from that time remained on the force. Robert Halden had retired more than 2 decades earlier and lived in seclusion in Fairfield, his health steadily declining. He learned of Sarin's death through a brief phone call from an old colleague. On the other end, the voice simply said, "He's gone, Halden." No further investigation. Halden stayed silent for a long time, before replying only, "I know." On local television, footage showed a few hearses leaving the main gate of the Sarin estate, with light snow falling and the Maine State flag at half-staff in front of the house. No police, no waiting press, just a small group of employees from his lumber mill who came to lay flowers. After the funeral, the house was locked up, the estate transferred to a distant nephew living in Portland. No one spoke of the past again, and the Ashford Hollow file remained untouched in the Augusta storage facility. Around Moosehead Lake, the community now numbered fewer than 400 residents. Most of those who had lived in the area in the early 1990s had either moved away or passed on. The abandoned houses of the Ashford compound had collapsed roofs, with weeds and maple saplings growing through broken window frames. In summer, local kids sometimes passed by and retold the old tale that 17 people disappeared there, but hardly anyone truly believed it anymore. The local Greenville Gazette ran a short piece in 2016 calling it a mystery of the North Woods, but it received only a handful of scattered comments. By the time Saren died, virtually no one still connected him to the 1991 events. To the new generation in Somerset, the name evoked only a man who had grown wealthy from timber and land, leaving behind a few weathered buildings and a small scholarship fund for Northern Forest Region students. Older folks occasionally murmured to each other that he took his secrets to the grave, and that was the end of it. Halden was 72 that year. He still lived in the small log house near Route 201, no longer drove, and rarely went out. On the living room wall hung the same old Moosehead Lake map, the paper now yellowed. When he heard of Saren's death, he simply removed his glasses, sat staring at the map for a long time, and touched the faded red line with his finger. That night, in the last notebook he still kept, he wrote, "He's gone. Both ends of the string are cut. The 17 are still lying in the snow, and the question remains exactly where it was." In the following week, newspapers printed a few more minor details. Saren died of heart failure, left no detailed will beyond granting power of attorney over assets to his nephew, and left behind no noteworthy personal papers. Most of his business records had been auctioned off, along with the lumber mill back in 2009 when he retired. The Somerset County Sheriff's Office did not reopen the investigation file, because there is no new evidence and no request from the county prosecutor. In the Augusta archive, File 91-1221 remained in drawer E4, slot 17, its label faded. The evidence had never been re-examined, no one had touched it. Each year the storage department simply checked the temperature and noted condition stable. To the administrative system, the Ashford case had long been closed, and no one expected anything more. Yet, in the Northern Forest region, people still occasionally retold the story as local legend. In winter, when the snow was deep and the lake frozen, some claimed they sometimes saw faint lights drifting across the water, like the headlights of an old truck. They told each other, then forgot again. As stories do in remote places, existing only during the coldest seasons. Halden didn't hear those tales, or if he did, he didn't believe them. He lived another 2 years in the same routine, waking early, making coffee, jotting small notes in his book, sometimes gazing north through the window. In one rare conversation with a neighbor, he said only one sentence: "When the truth dies before the person, it gets buried deeper than any body." After that, he never mentioned Ashford again. By the end of the year, Lake Caldera had frozen for the 27th time since the disappearances, and the whole area returned to its familiar state. Quiet, white, and no longer searched for anything. Samuel Saren's death was remembered only as old news that raised no new questions, and Ashford Hollow reverted to exactly what it had been for 3 decades, an empty space in the forest and a memory the entire community seemed to have silently agreed to forget. 3 years after Samuel Saren's death, just when the Ashford Hollow case appeared to have sunk completely into oblivion, in the fall of 2021, a 36-year-old freelance journalist named Eli Dorsey, born in Bangor and formerly with a small radio station, decided to produce an investigative podcast series titled The Hollow Remains. He had long been interested in unsolved disappearances in the Northeast, and while researching, he came across a brief mention of the Ashford case in a 1995 news summary that read only "Unsolved disappearance of 17 residents, no further development." The brevity intrigued him. Digging deeper, he discovered that the Maine State Archive in Augusta still held File 91-1221. In September of that year, Dorsey submitted a Freedom of Information request for access to the now declassified portion. 2 weeks later, he was allowed to view a redacted copy containing Lieutenant Robert Halden's reports and the evidence inventory. Among the documents, the detailed calendar note, Saren's visit, 8 p.m. caught his attention. But what stopped him longer was item 5 in the victim's property list. handwritten diary box of Lila Calderon, contents unclassified. According to the note, the diary had been returned to the Greenville Town Library in 1993 because it held no legal value. Dorsey drove to Greenville, a small town about 2 hours from Augusta. The library was in an old red brick building run by a single elderly librarian named Martha. When Dorsey inquired about the diary, she spent some time searching the storage area and eventually brought out a worn cardboard box labeled Private Collection, Calderon Family, donated 1993. Inside were several student notebooks with faded green cloth covers, ink blurred, pages yellowed. Wearing gloves, Dorsey opened them page by page. Most entries recorded Lila's college days, family matters, weather, and helping her parents at the sawmill. But toward the final pages, in December 1991, the tone changed abruptly. Dad and Mom are worried. Mr. S came to the house again, talking about forest land. I hate the way he looks at us. Dad says we'll never sell. Mom says we should go somewhere else this winter. Then, near the very end, a short, darker inked sentence, almost like a message. If I disappear, look near the lake. Dorsey sat still for a long time, rereading the line. He knew this could be the only surviving fragment showing that Lila had felt threatened before she vanished. He asked permission to photograph the entire notebook and took the images back to use as the foundation for the first episode. On October 15, 2021, the premiere episode, The Hollow Remains, Episode 1, The Vanishing of Ashford Hollow, went live online, opening with the sound of howling wind and crunching snow, Dorsey's low voice saying, 30 years ago, 17 people vanished from a frozen town in northern Maine. No bodies, no answers, just silence. He then recounted the case based on Halden's file, mentioning the calendar note and Lila's diary. Within 2 days, the first episode surpassed 200,000 listens and was widely shared on social media. Maine Today and the Portland Press-Herald published articles about the series, calling it a rare attempt to revive the greatest mystery of Maine's northern woods. Dorsey received hundreds of emails from locals sharing fragmented memories of the disappearances. Some mentioned hearing parents talk about a powerful businessman who lived near Caldera Lake. Others swore they had seen truck headlights moving through the forest road during that stormy night. He spent weeks interviewing, recording, and reconstructing the timeline. In Episode 3, he read Lila's exact words aloud and emphasized, "A person who leaves a note like that does not simply vanish without cause." The statement was quoted across numerous forums and spread beyond the state. By late November, when Episode 5 aired, The Hollow Remains had exceeded 1 million listens and ranked among the most followed investigative podcasts in New England. Some young people began visiting the woods around Caldera Lake, taking photos and videos, even forming online discussion groups called Find Lila. The community that had remained silent for 30 years started talking about Ashford Hollow again, each person recalling different fragments, as if memories buried under thick snow were being dug up. The Greenville Library received so many calls requesting to see the original diary that they moved it to secure storage. On the local news, a reporter interviewed Martha, who said, "We've kept it here since 1993, and no one ever asked. I thought everyone had forgotten. Now everybody's asking about Lila." The story spread quickly. Few knew that in an old file drawer in Augusta, a new label had been added to Lila Calderon's name. Subject of renewed media attention, The Hollow Remains, 2021. And from that moment, the disappearances that had seemingly died in silence began to revive, not through a police report or a crime scene discovery, but through the voice of someone who had never lived in that era, yet had forced the entire state of Maine to look again at a case everyone thought had slept peacefully for 3 decades. On February 17, 2023, more than a year after the first season of The Hollow Remains concluded, the Caldera Dam expansion project south of Moosehead Lake officially began the drawdown phase to reinforce the dam foundation. That morning, the Greenwater construction crew operated 6 high-capacity pumps continuously, drawing water from the lake into the eastern diversion channel. Around 2:20 p.m., after the water level had dropped more than 4 meters, The lakebed mud emerged as a sloping exposed shoreline stretching over 300 meters. Two workers, Travis McKay and Jordan Ellis, were assigned to clear debris and loose rock along the northern shoreline near the old pine stand. While shoveling thick mud, Travis heard metal strike something hard. He bent down, brushed gently with his hand, and what emerged from the black muck was an ivory-white bone fragment, curved like a forearm, one end still encrusted with sand and grass roots. At first he thought it was animal bone, but when he lifted it, the joint shape and weight made him pause. Jordan came over, shone his light, then stepped back. "No, that's not deer bone." They reported to the site supervisor, who immediately ordered work halted in the area. While waiting, Travis cleared more mud nearby and found a small round metal object, brown with rust, tangled in roots. When he wiped it clean, light glinted off a polished silver fragment, a thin bracelet, worn, engraved with 2 capital letters. LC. The supervisor immediately called the Maine State Police emergency line. The call was logged at 2:47 p.m. Suspicious find, possible human bone, metal object, location, Caldera Lake shoreline, coordinates 45.6679, 69.6165. 20 minutes later, state patrol vehicles arrived. The area was cordoned off with a 100-meter radius, and all workers were evacuated from the site. Lieutenant Andrew Moss, responsible for the Moosehead region, took direct command. He ordered temporary fencing, caution tape, and stakes to mark the discovery location. The Augusta forensics team was notified on priority and expected within 2 hours. While waiting, Wilson, a technician, documented the entire scene with a drone. Under the pale winter light, the lake surface lay bare as mud, dotted with glistening gray patches. The silver LC bracelet was placed in a clear evidence bag, sealed immediately, and labeled F01. The first bone fragment was labeled F02, collected with latex gloves, and placed on a sterile paper-covered stainless tray. The technician measured the distance between the two items, 89 centimeters apart. By 5 p.m., the forensics team arrived. They demarcated the mud area, excavated an additional meter deep, and recovered 4 more bone fragments, a pelvic section, 2 vertebrae, and a partial lower jaw, all showing similar degradation and dark brown mud adhesion, indicating long submersion. One witness, Travis, later stated in the report that when the flashlight illuminated teeth protruding from the mud, no one spoke for several minutes. Only the distant hum of the pumps could be heard. At 6:30 p.m., temporary floodlights illuminated the scene. The entire northern lakeshore was fully cordoned off, access blocked by 2 state police vehicles. Local officers were called in to maintain the outer perimeter. News of the discovery spread through internal channels, and within an hour the Portland Press-Herald posted a breaking story: possible human remains found at Caldera Lake construction site. A distant photo of the LC bracelet circulated online, immediately reminding many of the name Lila Calderon, the central figure in the 1991 disappearances. Police issued no confirmation. In the 7:05 p.m. report to command, Moss wrote, "Recovered suspected human bone and silver bracelet engraved LC area secured, awaiting forensic confirmation of identity." The forensics team collected a total of 6 bone fragments, 1 bracelet, 2 mud samples, sealed them per protocol, and transported everything to the Augusta lab that same night. At the edge of the site, the red and blue lights of police vehicles reflected on the darkened lake, shimmering on the thin new ice beginning to form. Cold wind whipped through the fencing, fluttering plastic sheeting, a young officer said quietly. 32 years, and the lake finally gave something back. Moss didn't answer, only stared at the half-dried mud where the bone had been lifted, still showing clear outlines. He marked the final coordinates on the map, initialed it, and ordered camp breakdown. At 8:40 p.m., the forensics convoy left the site, headlights sweeping across the dark forest on both sides of the road. Caldera Lake fell silent again, with only the wind and faint smoke drifting from the now still line of pumps. silent witnesses to a secret that had just begun to surface. On the morning of February 18, 2023, the 6 items recovered from the Caldera Lake scene arrived at the Maine State Central Forensic Laboratory in Augusta, sealed under codes F01 through F06. Chief Examiner Dr. Claire Bannon received them and logged the opening of evidence at 9:12 a.m. Testing was divided into 2 tracks: biological origin determination and chemical analysis. The pelvic bone was selected for DNA extraction due to its dense structure and lower degradation. Technicians used a sample grinder and EDTA solution to demineralize, followed by STR short tandem repeat DNA profiling. By 3 p.m. the same day, the core genetic profile was complete. The data was entered into the state's internal CODIS database for comparison with missing persons records. The result returned almost immediately: a full match with hair samples from the 1991 Ashford Hollow file. Reference E06. Probability of random match 1 in 18 billion. The bone was positively identified as belonging to Lila Calderon, missing at age 19. The preliminary report stated, specimen F02, human female, European descent, approximately 19 years of age, genetic match to case 91-1221. While the genetics team completed matching, the chemistry group analyzed residues in the bone marrow and adhering mud. GCMS gas chromatography, mass spectrometry was used to separate and identify residual organic compounds. Results showed morphine levels in the remaining bone tissue 7 times higher than environmental baseline, indicating morphine injection prior to death. The finding was confirmed by a second LCMS test, yielding the same result: morphine concentration equivalent to 2.31/co bone tissue, inconsistent with natural decomposition. Bannon noted, presence of morphine at lethal level, consistent with medical injection prior to death. Simultaneously, the osteology technician identified a circular fracture 8 mm in diameter on the second from bottom vertebra, with crushed and blackened bone edges. X-ray revealed a 6 mm long, 0.92 gram metal fragment inside. Atomic spectroscopy identified a copper-zinc alloy consistent with the core of a .308 Winchester hunting bullet. Upon extraction, the bullet tip showed high-velocity deformation from impact before penetration. Bannon's preliminary conclusion: gunshot wound present, probable cause of death, firearm injury. Concurrently, microbiology examined mud adhering to bracelet F01 and found pine pollen and cold water algae matching Caldera Lake's geological profile, supporting the theory that the body was deposited or submerged directly in the lake during winter. By the evening of February 19, the consolidated forensic summary was complete. Victim positively identified as Lila Calderon. Death caused by gunshot wound to the back, with evidence of high-dose morphine injection prior to death. Body remained in cold water environment for at least 3 decades. Associated evidence: bracelet and bullet fragment, resealed and coded, C-221, C-224. At 7 a.m. the next morning, the official 12-page report, stamped red homicide confirmed, was forwarded to Maine State Police Command and the Somerset County Sheriff's Office. In the conclusion, Dr. Bannon wrote, "Chemical and mechanical evidence demonstrate intentional homicide, not accident. Victim incapacitated with morphine, subsequently shot at close range with .308 caliber, body discarded into lake under natural freezing conditions." When the report circulated internally, officers in Somerset, many of whom had never heard of Ashford Hollow, read the final notation referencing the old case. Reference case: Ashford Missing Persons 91-1221. By afternoon, local media began running the story, citing sources within the Augusta Forensic Lab, confirming that skeletal remains found at Caldera Lake may be linked to the 1991 disappearance case. Although police had not yet officially released the identity, the search term Lila Calderon surged online, driving thousands of queries related to the podcast, The Hollow Remains. In the laboratory, Bannon stared at the screen displaying the perfectly aligned STR profiles from 2023 and the 1991 archive sample, the overhead light reflecting on the glass where she wrote the final line of the report in black ink. Match confirmed beyond reasonable doubt. At 6:05 p.m., the Caldera case status in the system was updated. Cold case reopened, awaiting assignment. For the first time in 32 years, Lila Calderon's name was removed from the missing persons list and transferred to the confirmed victim roster of an official homicide, triggering the next phase of actions by the Maine State Police. On February 21, 2023, 3 days after the Augusta Forensic Office released the examination results, the Maine State Police Office made the official decision to reopen the Ashford Hollow case, transferring the file to the Specialized Cold Case Unit, Maine Cold Case Unit. The decision was signed at 8:45 a.m., marking the first time in over 3 decades that the old case number 91-1221 was replaced with a new file named Ashford Homicide Investigation 23-0217. In the internal memorandum, the unit commander, Captain Matthew Rowe, noted briefly, based on forensic results, victim Lila Calderon is confirmed to have been murdered. Task: reinvestigate the entire 1991 Ashford disappearance case, consider possibility of multiple victims. The file was classified as high priority, with lead investigator assigned as Detective Marla Quinn, 42 years old, specializing in cold cases in northern Maine, who had successfully worked on 2 notable cases involving old DNA identification. At 10 a.m., Marla arrived at the Augusta office and received the nearly 500-page file, along with 8 evidence boxes preserved since 1991, that had been resealed. On the cover of the new file was a red stamp with bold text, "Do not archive. Active investigation." Below it was the signature of Dr. Claire Bannon, confirming the handover of all biological samples and the forensic report. Marla opened the file, turned the yellowed old pages, and read the initial statement by Lieutenant Robert Halden. The final line in his note made her pause. Disappearance pattern inconsistent with voluntary departure. She noted in her personal notebook, Halden, Somerset PD, retired 1995, possible key witness. She then reviewed the evidence catalog, red fabric fragment, calendar marked, Saren's visit, 8 p.m., cigarette butt, hair sample, silver bracelet, LC, .308 bullet fragment. She marked 3 priority items for additional testing with modern technology: fabric fiber sample, cigarette, and bullet fragment. At 11:15 a.m., Marla attended a meeting with the forensic team and state prosecutor. Displayed on the screen was a map of the Moosehead area, showing the location where human remains were discovered. Captain Rowe opened, 32 years, no living witnesses at the scene. But now we have DNA, bullets, and the message. If I disappear, look near the lake. The question is, who shot, and why? Regional Prosecutor Allison Graves added, if there is morphine in the bones, we need to find the source. Back then, morphine was only circulated through medical channels, with registration records. Marla recorded everything and proposed the first steps. Review 1991, medical records in the Millinocket area, where Samuel Saren lived, and trace the list of doctors or nurses with private practice licenses within a 20-mile radius. The meeting lasted over an hour, ending with agreement on the plan. Phase 1, re-verify old persons of interest. Phase 2, resurvey the Ashford scene. Phase 3, test remaining evidence with next-generation DNA technology. At 1 p.m., Marla drove back to Somerset, where the case began. The snow was melting, the road to Greenville still soaked, with puddles reflecting the faint sunlight. When the car passed the sign Ashford Hollow 4 miles, she turned on the recorder and spoke briefly. February 21, 2023. Beginning investigation of case 23-0217. Victim identified as Lila Calderon. Original 1991 file concluded as missing person. Now confirmed as homicide. Objective: reconstruct events of the night of December 21, 1991. She stopped in the small town of Greenville to visit the local police department and request access to the old archives. The duty officer brought out 2 dusty document boxes, including the final faxed report Halden sent to the Somerset County prosecutor on December 25, 1991. The faded typed line read, "Recommend checking black Freightliner truck license, 7C412. She photographed it and saved it to the new file. In the afternoon, she went to the Caldera Lake area, where the remains were found. The lakeshore had been fenced off by construction, the pumps had stopped, and the water was rising again. Marla stepped onto the dry mudflat, looked at the patch of ground where the bones had been excavated, with wooden stakes still planted around it, and frayed caution tape. She stood there for a long time, listening to the wind sweeping through the pine trees, then said quietly, as if noting to herself, 32 years, 1 person dead, 16 others still unknown where they are. In the evening, upon returning to her temporary office in Greenville, she began drawing up a detailed investigation plan. The first page of her notebook listed 4 items. 1. Contact Halden family. 2. Verify witness Eileen Frost. 3. Review Samuel Sarin estate. 4. Request analysis of evidence E03 using mucosal DNA technology. At 8:10 p.m., she sent an official email to her superiors. Cold Case 23, E0217, entering Phase 1. Projected timeline, 6 months. Request approval for expanded testing budget and additional personnel. In the state data system, after 3 decades, the Ashford file changed status from closed unsolved to active homicide. A small notification appeared on the Maine State Police internal dashboard. Case 23, E0217, initiated by date. Marla Quinn, subject, Lila Calderon. And as the office door closed, the green light from the monitor reflected on the brand new file cover, where the bold black text stood out. Ashford Homicide Investigation, 23, E0217, open. On the morning of February 23, 2023, 2 days after receiving the file, Detective Marla Quinn returned to Ashford Hollow with the state forensic team to survey the Calderon house, recorded in the 1991 report as the center of the disappearance. The temperature was 8 degrees below zero. A thin layer of snow covered the old ground, but the decayed wooden structures remained in place, silent among the pine forest. The 6-member team was fully equipped with protective gear, 3D seam scanners, and the latest generation luminol solution for detecting hidden blood traces. Marla opened the file she brought, compared it with the hand-drawn 1991 compound diagram by Lieutenant Halden, and marked each building with small flags. "Start with the Calderon house," she said firmly. The front door had come off its hinges. The floorboards creaked as they entered. In the light of portable lamps, sawdust and cobwebs covered the ceiling. Time had blurred everything. Technician Thomas set up the laser projector to scan the entire room, creating a 3D spatial model for comparison with the old diagram. They then began examining the wooden floor, focusing around the dining table area and the hallway leading to the living room, where 1991 photos showed unusual scratches on the floor. Marla knelt down, gently pried up a warp board with a thin knife, revealing thick dust underneath. Thomas poured luminol into the spray bottle, turned off all lights, and sprayed evenly. Within seconds, the space plunged into darkness, with only the faint blue glow of the chemical reaction slowly spreading across the wood. On the floor surface in front of the dining table, long winding streaks appeared, thin like strings, stretching from the middle of the room toward the back door, clearly dried blood that had been wiped away but left traces. The technician took continuous photos, measured the length of the luminescent area, estimating about 2.5 meters. Marla stood still, the blue light reflecting on her face through the protective goggles. "Code F11 to F14, she said softly. Under another board near the kitchen cabinet, they found 3 more evenly spaced round glowing spots, like footprints. When tested with swabs, the qualitative result confirmed positive for human hemoglobin. Thomas noted in the log, residue consistent with human blood. Marla wrote in her notebook, extended blood trails, possibly where the body or injured victim was moved. They continued spraying luminol around the living room corners, staircase, and small hallway leading to the back door. At the foot of the stairs, the light revealed a curved crescent-shaped streak, darker than the surrounding area. When illuminated with UV, the luminescent path stood out clearly, indicating greater blood accumulation there. She requested wood and dust samples from the glowing area, sealed as F-15. The entire area was photographed with infrared camera for record. After checking the ground floor, they moved to the upper floor, where Lila's bedroom once was. The room was heavily damaged, roof leaking, floor moldy and damp. Still, Thomas sprayed test solution around the headboard and window areas. A faint streak appeared in the corner of the floor, small but clear. This sample was also collected and recorded. When finished, Marla opened her tablet to view the newly completed 3D crime scene model. The luminescent points marked with bright green dots, forming a continuous path from the middle of the dining room, through the hallway, stopping at the foot of the stairs, heading toward the back door, matching the direction Halden had described in the old report. No signs of forced entry, but back door found ajar. She sat down, compared the two maps, noting the surprisingly consistent match after 32 years. Outside, the wind blew stronger, carrying the sound of branches hitting the walls. The forensic team finished the scan at 4:20 p.m., discovering a total of 7 suspected human blood trace areas. Each location was measured, labeled, and imaged in the system. Before leaving, Marla walked around the house one last time, looking down at the floor where the light had faded. She imagined the stormy night of 1991. In this room someone had been injured or dragged away. Her final note in the notebook read, "Multiple positive luminol reactions, proving violent activity occurred. Need DNA analysis to identify victim." At 5:05 p.m., the convoy left Ashford compound, carrying the newly sealed samples labeled F11 to F15. As darkness fell, snow began falling again, gradually covering the fresh footprints they had left on the ice. The only new marks in a crime scene that time had covered for over 3 decades. On February 25, 2023, 2 days after discovering the blood traces in the Calderon house, Detective Marla Quinn submitted an application for a search warrant for Samuel Saren's former residence in Millinocket. The request document clearly stated the legal basis: forensic examination, confirming Leila Calderon was murdered with morphine and .308 bullet, plus evidence in the Calderon house, proving human blood traces at the scene. Somerset County Court approved the warrant at 10:40 a.m. the same day, authorizing a full search of the property named Saren Estate, including the 2-story main house, garage, and rear storage building, with a 48-hour time limit. The investigation team consisted of 5 members, accompanied by a county prosecutor representative for oversight. Upon arrival, the large wooden house stood hidden behind rows of old pine trees, the front door sealed, since Saren's funeral in 2018, interior thick with dust. The current owner, a grandnephew, signed the consent form. At 11:20 a.m., the team unlocked the door, dim light filtering through dusty windows. Marla divided the team. 2 checked the ground floor. 2 went to the second floor. She and technician Thomas handled the garage and storage building. In the ground floor living room, furniture remained intact. Cracked leather chairs, old wooden table, large shelf containing ledgers and business papers. In the third drawer, the technician found a brown leather-bound notebook labeled Accounts 1990-1992. Inside, instead of regular financial records, was a list of land parcels around Ashford with handwritten notes. Calderon, 14 acres by the lake. Offer declined 3 times. At the end was a heavily underlined line. If he refuses again, there are other ways. Marla photographed it, sealed the notebook, coded F21. Meanwhile, on the second floor, the other group opened a locked metal cabinet containing a small wooden box with 5 glass vials labeled morphine sulfate 30 milligrams per milliliter. Manufactured by Boston Medical Supply, expiration 1993, along with an old metal syringe. All were seized and coded F22. The scene report stated, morphine vials found in secured container, matches substance found in victim's bone. Marla received the radio message and quickly went to the garage. The space was dark and cold, the black Freightliner truck still there, thick with dust, tires rusted. She asked the technician to open the rear trunk and check compartments. In a small compartment on the door, they found a damp envelope containing a blurry photo of a girl standing in front of a wooden house, an image of Lila Calderon, taken from a distance, apparently not a family photo, but a covert shot. On the back, in blue ballpoint pen, taken autumn 91. Marla looked at the photo for a moment, packaged it in an evidence bag, coded F23. She turned to Thomas and said quietly, "We've got a personal connection." They continued searching the rear storage building, filled with rotting wooden crates. One crate had a broken lock. Inside were unsigned copies of land transfer contracts, naming seller Edward Calderon, buyer Samuel Sarin, planned date December 22, 1991. Exactly one day after the entire community vanished. The papers were creased, one corner stained with ink. Marla skimmed through them, realizing Sarin had prepared to seize the lakeside land through a presumed transaction. The contract was photographed and sealed as F24. By 3 p.m., they completed the house search, collecting 4 main pieces of evidence: land ledger, morphine vials, photo of Lila, and unsigned contract. All were packaged, sealed, and transferred to the specialized vehicle for transport to Augusta. Before leaving, Marla walked along the second-floor hallway, pausing at the door to Sarin's study. On the desk was a small overturned picture frame. She lifted it, dusted it off. Inside was a photo of middle-aged Sarin, standing next to an unfamiliar woman whose face had been scratched out, with a blurred lake in the background. No note, but the angle showed it was Caldera Lake. She wrote in her notebook, "Lake appears in photo Sarin, directly linked to body disposal site." As she left the house, the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, reflecting on the moss-covered wall where the faded lettering on the wooden sign still read, "Sarin Timber and Company." In the yard, she looked back at the building one last time, feeling it was like an empty shell, still holding the cold scent of old years. The preliminary report was completed on site, stating, search results: discovery of morphine matching type, found in Lila Calderon's remains. Business documents confirming land dispute with Calderon family. Photographic evidence showing subject's personal interest in victim. Recommended next steps: fingerprint analysis, DNA testing on syringe, review of Sarin's medical records to verify morphine possession. At the end of the report, Marla wrote her initial assessment: preliminary motive, land acquisition combined with personal obsession. As the vehicle left Millinocket, night had fallen, the rows of pines on both sides of the road stretching into thin mist, and in her mind, the 4 new pieces of evidence connected 3 fragments of old memory: land, drug, and the gaze from a covert photograph, all pointing to the same girl who vanished in the winter 32 years earlier. On February 27, 2023, 2 days after completing the Sarin house search, Detective Marla Quinn returned to Augusta to inspect the old evidence storage at the Maine State Criminal Archive Center. She brought the evidence list from File 91-1221, consisting of 8 items transferred in 1995, to verify integrity and check for remaining biological samples that could be exploited with next-generation DNA technology. The archive was housed in an unmarked 2-story concrete building, temperature-controlled at 10 degrees Celsius, with a faint smell of metal and preservative solution. The warehouse manager, Mr. James Fuller, greeted her and led her to the main storage room. Along 2 rows of metal shelves were hundreds of white plastic boxes with black labels, each containing files or evidence from discontinued cases. Mr. Fuller checked the log, locating row E, shelf 4, bin 17. Home to Ashford missing persons 91-1221. The plastic box still had its original yellow seal, dated stored January 12, 1995, with faded signature of Lieutenant Robert Halden underneath. Marla put on gloves, carefully removed the seal, signed confirmation of opening at 10:28 a.m. Inside were 6 moisture-proof sample bags, 2 paper file envelopes, and a small logbook recording evidence movements. She laid everything on the steel table, checking each code. E01 red fabric fragment, E02 calendar page, E03 cigarette butt, E04 fiber sample, E05 glass tumbler, E06 human hair. When reaching the last bag coded E06, she noticed the seal intact, no analysis notes. The black ink scribble on the label read "Not tested, insufficient tech, 1991." Inside was a small envelope containing several long light brown hairs wrapped in wax paper. Marla reread Halden's 1991 report, noting hair sample collected from chair in Calderon house, not analyzed due to lack of equipment. She carefully resealed the bag and signed it for internal transfer to the second-floor DNA lab. The extraction process began at 11:10 a.m., using the latest STR technology capable of reading DNA from long-stored objects. The technician cut a 2-centimeter segment of hair, soaked it in keratin-breaking solution, then amplified the genes. The genetic sequence data was compared to Lila Calderon's 2023 profile. Results appeared on screen at 2:36 p.m. 16 loci matched completely, error rate below 1 in 20 billion. The automatic report printed the conclusion, DNA sequence consistent with sample F02. Marla held the result, silent for a few seconds. The hair fully matching Lila confirmed that the most important piece of evidence had been overlooked due to technical limitations. She signed confirmation, requested the sequence be entered into the National CODIS database. In the supplementary notes, she wrote, "Sample E06, confirmed as belonging to victim found at Calderon house, indicating direct contact by Lila at the scene where blood traces were detected. Failure to analyze the sample during 1991-1995 led to missing the connection between victim and crime area." She also requested cross-checking of other evidence for foreign DNA, starting with cigarette butt E03, scheduled for next testing. After completing the log, Marla returned to the storage room, repacked the old samples, applied new seals, updated code E06R/2023, processed. Mr. Fuller looked at her, shaking his head. "Over 30 years, no one opened this box." Marla replied softly, "Now it has to be opened." She photographed the entire storage box, including Halden's signature, for inclusion in the current file. Before leaving Augusta, she sent a brief report to Commander Matthew Rowe. DNA test results confirm hair sample unprocessed in 1991, belongs to victim Lila Calderon. This confirms initial investigative error in evidence examination. Recommend prosecutor review of early investigation responsibility and permission to fully exploit remaining unanalyzed samples. At 5:05 p.m., she left the archive center, carrying copies of the results and photos of the evidence box. As she stepped outside, the late winter sun slanted across the frozen road, reflecting off the signed State Forensic Archive, Augusta. In the car, Marla opened her notebook and wrote a brief assessment. Number 14. E06. DNA match investigation error, confirms establishes presence of victim in crime scene. Below it, she added an italicized note. One overlooked sample can change an entire past. On the way back to Somerset, she played the recording of the February 21st meeting. Captain Rowe's voice came through the speaker. 32 years of silence. Just one small mistake can lose the whole case. Marla turned off the recorder, keeping her eyes northward. In her mind, the image of the silent Calderon roof, amid the snow, and the old papers with Halden's signature overlapped, forming a clear link between two moments, 1991 and 2023, where one untested hair had buried the truth for over 3 decades, and now, at last, had spoken. On March 1, 2023, after the DNA test results confirmed the investigative error in 1991. Detective Marla Quinn proceeded with the next step of the plan, re-interviewing surviving former witnesses. Records showed that the only one still in Maine was Eileen Frost, the person who first reported the disappearance and had stated she saw the lights of a black truck in front of the Calderon house. Eileen is now 89 years old, living in a small nursing home in Greenville, in frail health, but with a still sharp memory. That afternoon, Marla, along with an assistant investigator, visited her in her second-floor lounge room, bringing copies of the old statement. The elderly woman sat by the window, her eyesight dim but her voice still clear. When reminded of the Ashford case, her hands trembled slightly. "I thought no one wanted to ask about that anymore," she said, then nodded in agreement to cooperate. Marla turned on the recorder, placed it gently on the table, opened the 1991 statement section, and read aloud. "You stated that at 9:15 p.m., you saw the lights of a yellow truck stop in front of the Calderon house." Eileen was silent for a moment, then slowly corrected, "No, it wasn't yellow. The lights were white, but they flickered as if covered in mist. I remember clearly because I had just poured tea, and the light reflected on the cup. I looked at the wall clock. The second hand had just passed, 9:12 p.m. Marla immediately noted in her pad, "Time confirmed, 9:12 p.m. Marla continued, "Can you describe the truck in more detail?" Eileen closed her eyes and spoke slowly. "It was large, enclosed box, painted black, headlights positioned lower than usual for trucks, bright white like industrial lights. It stopped for a few minutes. I didn't hear the engine, only saw the lights shining through the Calderon house windows, then they went out. After that, darkness covered everything." She confirmed there was no heavy snowfall at that time. The storm only grew strong about half an hour later. When Marla showed her the photo of the black Freightliner truck taken from the Sarin Estate garage, Eileen stared at it for a long time, then gave a small nod. "Exactly the same. The lights were like that too. I remember the front grille pattern, no mistake." Marla let her rest for a few minutes before asking further. "That night, did you hear any people or other sounds?" Eileen replied, "Yes, a low sound, like a metal door slamming shut, then the howl of wind. After that, silence. I sat waiting for lights to come back on, but nothing. The next morning, I went over to check, everything was gone." Marla recorded everything, signed off, witness re-interview complete, and requested a cross-check with 1991 weather data. The state meteorological report confirmed the snowstorm began at 9:40 p.m., meaning the 9:12 p.m. time frame perfectly matched the window when the truck could have approached the compound area before strong winds arrived. This rendered Sarin's 1991 alibi, that he was ill, did not leave the house, with a nurse as witness, worthless, since the 21 o'clock temperature entry recorded by Nurse Malone could have been fabricated to create an alibi. Marla instructed the team to analyze old medication logs from Nurse Malone, taking ink and paper samples for carbon dating via spectroscopy. Preliminary results confirmed the 21 o'clock entry was written with ink, manufactured in 1995, impossible to exist in a 1991 logbook. This report completely destroyed Sarin's alibi. In the summary report sent to the state office that evening, Marla wrote, "Re-interview with primary witness Eileen Frost, clarifies vehicle light color and exact time. Cross-checking meteorological data and falsified nurse record, eliminates 1991 alibi of subject Sarin." When the session ended, Mrs. Eileen held Marla's hand and said softly, "I still remember that light, it tore the night in two. I've waited 30 years for someone to ask again." Marla only nodded, saying nothing. When she left the nursing home, it was already dark yellow streetlights, casting streaks on the remaining snow on the road. In the car, Marla played back the recording, hearing Eileen's trembling voice say, 9:12 p.m. That sound felt like a time marker spiraling backward, perfectly aligning with the new chain of evidence. At 9:15 p.m., she sent a short message to Commander Rowe. "Witness Frost confirms truck sighting, 9:12 p.m. Alibi invalid, proceeding to verify fuel logs and vehicle records. The internal system immediately updated, Case 23, NISA 0217. Status: alibi disproved, lead reclassified active. On her phone screen, the flashing notification reflected in the rearview mirror, like the white light in Eileen's memory from 32 years earlier, now shining directly into the final weak point of a lie that had lasted half a lifetime. On March 3, 2023, 2 days after Eileen Frost's statement officially eliminated Samuel Saren's alibi, Detective Marla Quinn continued reviewing personnel files of those who worked for Saren Timber and Company between 1989 and 1992. In the list kept at the state tax office, she discovered the name Thomas Laird, born 1958, who had been a heavy-haul truck driver for Saren, leaving the job in early 1992, citing workplace injury. Current address records showed he was living in the town of Dover-Foxcroft, about 60 miles from Greenville. Marla contacted the local police department and learned Laird was now 65, working part-time as a security guard at a small lumber yard in stable health. That afternoon, she visited him at his small log house at the end of Elm Street, bringing copies of old driver lists. Laird opened the door, thin build, silver beard, cautious eyes. When Marla introduced herself and mentioned Saren's name, he froze, saying quietly, "I thought that story was dead." She replied, "No, it just came back to life." In the living room, light filtered through dusty windows, the smell of motor oil still lingering. Marla turned on the recorder and asked, "Did you work for Saren through the end of 1991? Laird nodded, voice hoarse. "Yes. I drove the black Freightliner truck, plate 7C412, hauling lumber from the Millinocket mill to Ashford every week." The statement made her pause her pen. She asked again, "Was that truck still in operation in December 1991? He confirmed, "Yes. The last day I drove it was the 21st. I remember, because it was the stormy night. Mr. Saren told me to haul some material crates up to the Caldera Lake area and get back quick before the roads closed with snow." Marla looked up, silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Did you go alone?" Laird sighed. "At first, yes, but halfway there he called on the radio and told me to stop at the edge of Ashford Forest. When I stopped, he was already standing there in the snow, telling me to open the rear box. He brought another man with him. I couldn't see the face clearly, only that they carried something wrapped in cloth into the back, very heavy. I asked what it was. He just said wood samples and told me not to ask more." Laird's voice shook, his hands gripping the coffee mug tightly. "I drove them close to the lake, about half a mile from the compound, exactly 9:10 p.m. I checked the dashboard clock. When we arrived, he told me to wait in the truck, then the two of them carried it into the woods. About 15 minutes later, they came back empty-handed. His coat had mud stains. He said, 'Done. Head back.' I didn't understand anything, only knew that when we reached Millinocket, snow was pouring down. He told me never to mention this to anyone. A few months later, I had an accident at the yard, then quit for good." Marla asked further, "Did you know who the man with Saren was?" He shook his head. "No. Tall, wearing a gray coat, gloves, southern accent not local." She noted it down, then showed him a 2023 construction site photo of Caldera Lake. He stared for a long time, then pointed, "Right there at the water's edge, where I stopped the truck. I remember because there was a big maple tree nearby." Every detail matched the coordinates where Lila Calderon's body was found. Marla read the statement aloud again and asked him to sign confirmation. When the pen touched paper, Laird's hand trembled, ink smearing. He said softly, "I kept silent for 30 years. Now I see it in my dreams every night." Marla asked one last question. "Did you ever tell anyone else?" Laird answered, "No, I was afraid of him. Saren had people everywhere." The statement was completed at 3:52 p.m. Coded, Witness Statement, W07. She left the house and immediately called Commander Rowe on the encrypted line. Identified new witness, Thomas Laird, Saren's driver. State subject was at Caldera Lake, night of December 21, 1991. Time 21:10. Matches frost, 21:12. Additional unidentified person present. Rowe was silent for a few seconds. Then said, "Good. This is the missing link." The summary report was sent that evening, with attached photos confirming the location Laird pointed to matched the body discovery coordinates. The same day, the state prosecutor's office added the note, "Alibi officially nullified. New witness places subject Saren at crime scene." Marla returned to Greenville after dark, the road covered in ice. In the car, she replayed the part where Laird said they carried something wrapped in cloth, his voice breaking on the last word. In the darkness, she pictured two men dragging a heavy object from the truck bed. Light snow falling, headlights dimly glowing, and just minutes later, the truck vanishing into the stormy night. 32 years later, that scene returned through the voice of an old driver, perfectly aligning with the timeline she was piecing together. Minute by minute, detail by detail, and everything led to the same place. Caldera Lake, 9:12 p.m., December 21, 1991. On March 6, 2023, after Thomas Laird's statement was verified, the state prosecutor's office directed the cold case unit to implement temporary witness monitoring to ensure safety and gather additional supplementary data. Since Mr. Laird had admitted there was a second unidentified person who appeared with Saren on the night of December 21, 1991, Detective Marla Quinn was assigned direct responsibility. In the morning, she and a technician installed environmental audio recording equipment in Laird's home with his consent, while also placing a small outdoor security camera on the porch, both for protection and to monitor whether anyone contacted or surveilled him after the interview. In a brief conversation, Laird mentioned that in recent days, he had noticed strange cars parking in front of his house at night, not leaving until nearly dawn. Marla noted this and requested local police increase patrols. At noon, when she returned to deliver witness certification paperwork, she noticed on Laird's desk an old dark brown leather-bound notebook, corners torn, similar to a transport logbook. He said quietly, "I've kept it since back then. No one ever asked about it." Marla asked permission to examine it and immediately recognized inside were scribbled pencil notes, scattered dates from November to December 1991. The first pages contained lumber transport figures, but toward the middle, the tone shifted to personal 12/19. Mr. S. said, "Keep truck ready, no one to know." Next, 12/21, left Millinocket at 7:40. Sky starting to mist. Mr. S. said, "Don't turn back until order received." The last line on that page was shaky, ink blurred. He said, "Burn everything." Marla looked closely and asked, "Did you write this the same night?" Laird nodded, speaking softly. "I wrote when I got home, hands still shaking. He told me not to talk about it, then brought oil to the back of the truck. I didn't know what he planned. I just heard a small explosion, thought he was burning trash." Marla immediately requested the notebook be seized as evidence, coded F31, sealed on the spot, and had all pages dated December 21, 1991, photocopied. On the following page, Laird had written one more faint, hard-to-read sentence, but under ultraviolet light, 3 words appeared clearly: "No trace left." The pencil marks were deeply impressed, lines trembling, showing the writer's fear. She placed the notebook in a moisture-proof bag, sealed it, and prepared a report with his signature. "I want to hand over everything, keep nothing," he said, eyes gazing out the window where scattered snow fell on the distant forest. She reassured him, "Everything will be protected. You're not alone anymore." After leaving, Marla transferred the notebook directly to the Greenville office and photographed each page to send to the document examination lab. Subsequent handwriting comparison confirmed it fully matched Laird's signature and tax office notes from 1991, ruling out fabrication. In the report sent to Commander Rowe at 6:40 p.m., she wrote, Recovered journal from witness Thomas Laird. Entry dated the 21st of December 1991 contained statement, he said. Burn everything. Language indicates direct instruction from Samuel Sarin to destroy evidence. Attached were copies of the journal pages, with high-resolution images showing indented writing. Rowe replied immediately, interpretation probable instruction to eliminate remains post-homicide. Maintained chain of custody. The next morning, the state's language analyst concluded that burn and everything were written with heavier pressure than the rest, indicating emotional agitation. They also found a faint circular mark on the margin, like the bottom of a jar, possibly oil residue, matching the account of he brought oil to the back of the truck. Based on the new evidence, Marla prepared a supplemental report. Evidence F31. Witness Laird's journal contains direct notation of Sarin's order to destroy material. Phrase, he said. Burn everything constitutes indirect evidence of the subject's direction to dispose of the body or evidence at the caldera scene. Combined with witness statements and mud stains on Sarin's coat, grounds exist to establish his return to the scene after the victim's killing. The report was sent to the state prosecutor the same day. As night fell, Marla sat in her car, staring at the journal page photo on her tablet screen. The faint line, he said, burn everything, burned into her eyes, like a belated message from someone who had witnessed what no one else dared speak. Outside, snow continued falling lightly, covering the forest road where 32 years earlier, the black truck's lights had once stopped, and then vanished, leaving behind only two trembling sentences in a small notebook that had now become the final piece, proving the disappearance in Ashford Hollow was never accidental. It had been calculated, and someone had ordered everything to burn to ash. On June 25, 2023, after more than 3 months since the seizure of Thomas Laird's journal and the completion of forensic authenticity analyses, an arrest warrant for him was approved by Somerset County Court upon the request of the Maine State Prosecutor's Office. The warrant stated, suspect Thomas Laird, born 1958, is suspected of participating in concealing murder and destroying evidence related to Ashford Homicide Case 23-0217 in the capacity of an accessory. The cold case, Special Task Force coordinated with New Hampshire State Police to execute the arrest at Laird's new residence, a small log house on the outskirts of Conway, where he had moved at the beginning of May to avoid attention after his witness identity was revealed in the media. At 6:42 a.m., 2 patrol cars and 1 state investigator vehicle stopped in front of the house. Team leader, Marla Quinn, was present in person. The door opened on the second knock. Laird was wearing an old shirt, his eyes tired, but showing no resistance. Marla read the Miranda rights in an even voice. Thomas Laird, you are under arrest for aiding in the destruction of evidence and participating in the concealment of murder in the 1991 Ashford Hollow case. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. He only gave a small nod and said quietly, I knew this day would come. Laird was handcuffed and escorted to the vehicle, while other officers carried out a supplemental search warrant to seize any related documents or evidence. In the garage, they found a small wooden box containing old photos of the Freightliner truck and several fuel receipts, dated December 21 and 22, 1991, the time of the crime. All were sealed, coded F41 to F44. At 9 a.m., the convoy moved to Augusta, where the Maine State Police Special Interrogation Room was already prepared. Laird was taken into the soundproof room, gray walls, metal table, 2 facing chairs. Marla entered carrying a thick file and the recorder. She began with identity confirmation, then read the preliminary charges. Mr. Laird, you are preliminarily charged under Section 257, accessory to murder. You may make a statement to clarify your role. He was silent for a while, eyes down on the table, then said softly, I never shot anyone. I only drove. I was afraid of him. Marla kept her voice calm. We know you didn't fire the gun, but you helped transport and destroy evidence. Your notebook says, he said, burn everything. Would you like to explain that sentence? He sighed, hands trembling. I heard an explosion behind me. I turned and saw him standing near the truck bed, smoke rising. He told me to get the oil, pour it on that pile of cloth, and burn it. I didn't know what was inside. When the fire started, he looked at me and said, "Now no one will ever know. I just wanted to get out of there." Marla asked, "Are you certain the person in the box was Lila Calderon?" He nodded slowly. "Now I am sure. Back then I only saw her hair, light brown, long, sticking out from under the cloth." The room was silent for a few seconds. She noted it down, then showed him the photo of the silver bracelet engraved, "LC recovered from Caldera Lake." He stared at the photo, voice choking. He was wearing it on his sleeve when he came back. "I asked why," he said. "Just a keepsake." I didn't dare ask more. Marla continued, "What did you do afterward?" Laird replied, "I drove the truck back to the yard. He told me to wash the tires clean, then return the vehicle. The next week I had the accident. I think he arranged it so I'd quit." She silently recorded everything, then asked the final question, "Why didn't you report it to the police?" He gave a dry laugh. "Who would believe me? He had money, connections. I was just a driver." I carried the guilt of silence. At 10:50 a.m., here the interview paused for him to sign the statement confirmation. The state prosecutor was immediately notified. The preliminary report stated, "Suspect Thomas Laird admits presence at the scene and carrying out destruction of evidence on Samuel Saren's instructions. Information matches Journal F31 and Caldera Lake field data." That afternoon, Somerset County Court held an emergency detention hearing. The assigned public defender requested bail, citing health concerns, but the judge denied it, citing risk of evidence tampering and the severity of the case. Laird was transferred to Augusta Correctional Facility, private cell, 24-hour monitoring. In the file, under psychological status, it read, "Cooperative, no aggressive behavior, shows signs of stress and remorse." That evening, Marla sat in her office, rereading the interrogation transcript. At the final note, she added, "Suspect admits actions, provides detailed description matching investigation facts, directly confirms Saren's participation in victim body disposal process. Evidence establishes accessory liability." When she turned off the light, the night outside the Augusta office window blanketed the city. Far away, the red lights of the detention center glowed like the temporary endpoint of a journey stretching over 30 years, where one final witness had become the accused, and the long silence around Caldera Lake finally began to make real sound. On June 27, 2023, 2 days after Thomas Laird was arrested, the second interrogation was conducted in the Maine State Investigation Room under the direct supervision of Prosecutor Allison Graves. Detective Marla Quinn presided over the questioning, with a tape recorder, a map of Caldera Lake, and a copy of the F31 journal placed in front of her. After having his right to counsel confirmed, Laird agreed to provide a detailed account of the entire events of the night of December 21, 1991. He sat silently for a long moment, eyes fixed on his trembling hands, then began to speak. "That night, I drove the black Freightliner from Millinocket to Ashford, carrying 2 cans of oil, some tarps, and repair tools in the back compartment. Mr. Saren sat in the passenger seat, wearing a leather jacket and carrying a small suitcase. He said he had a meeting with Calderon to sign land papers and needed me to come along in case the roads were icy. When the truck reached the edge of Ashford Hollow, around 8:40 p.m., light snow began to fall. He told me to turn off the lights and wait about 200 meters from the compound. He got out, took the suitcase, and walked in. I stayed in the truck, listening to the radio. Around a little after 9 p.m., I heard 2 short bangs, like from a hunting rifle. Then a few minutes later, he came back, his jacket covered in snow, with dark streaks on the sleeve. Laird's voice choked. I asked what happened. He just said personal business, then ordered me to turn the truck toward the lake. I didn't dare ask more. Marla asked him to describe the suitcase he had carried. He replied, "Small, brown leather. Inside were syringes and vials of medicine. I saw them when he opened it in the passenger seat at the start of the trip. I remember a very strange smell, like a hospital. The lab report detecting morphine in Lila's bones made that detail clear. Laird continued. When we got near the lake, he told me to stop the truck, then he radioed someone. A few minutes later, another man appeared from the woods, wearing a gray coat, face covered. They went to the back of the truck, opened it, and Saren told me to help carry something heavy. When I approached, I saw it was a thick rolled-up blanket, but under the light, I recognized human hair, long, light brown. He yelled at me to keep going, saying, "It's just sample cargo." I helped them carry it to the edge of the lake and set it down. The other man pulled out a long metal object, probably a gun, from his pocket, while Saren took out the suitcase, opened it, and prepared a syringe. He said quietly, "She's still breathing." Then I saw him bend down and inject something into the girl's arm. I was standing back, but I saw the body twitch slightly, then go still. After that, he took the gun from the other man, pointed it at her head, and pulled the trigger. There was one loud shot, then silence. He told the other man to drag the body onto the truck. Laird paused, head bowed, tears streaming down. I had seen her parents earlier, while waiting for Saren near the Calderon house. Through the open door, I saw the man, Mr. Edward, slumped next to the table, blood on his chest. I understood everything was already over. Marla silently took notes on every word, then asked, "After killing Lila, what did Saren do next?" He replied, "We drove the body to the forest edge near the lake. He told me to get out, get the oil, pour it on the blanket, then strike a match. I stepped back. The fire flared up. The stench was horrific. He watched for a while, then said, 'Now no one will know.' But when we turned away, I saw the fire hadn't burned completely, only the outer layer. The inside was still there. He ordered us to push it all into the water. The other man and I pushed together. It sank through the cracked ice. Then he told us to leave." Marla opened the map and asked him to mark the route. With a trembling red pen, Laird drew from Millinocket down to Ashford along Route 15, turned right onto Caldera Trail, stopped at a point about 200 meters from the compound, then drew a line to the northern edge of the lake, precisely where the bones were discovered in 2023. He signed his name below the map. She asked, "Did you hear the name of the man who went with Mr. Saren?" He answered, "No, I only remember him calling the other man Doc." Marla noted it down and cross-checked with old Saren Timber and Company personnel records. They had once employed a private nurse, Nancy Malone, who died in 2001. It was possible Doc was a medical associate who had helped Saren obtain morphine. Laird continued, "After we got back to Millinocket, he told me to wash the truck with hot water, especially the rear tires. He paid me $200 and told me to take a few days off. A week later I had an accident, fell off a forklift, broke my leg. No one ever called me again." Marla opened her laptop and displayed photos of the Freightliner truck taken in Saren's garage in 2023, asking, "Is this the truck?" He confirmed, "Yes, plate 7, C412, lowered headlights." "That's it." She asked him to sign the confirmation. In a supplemental statement, Laird described the Calderon house scene that night in detail. The house lights were on, but when he came out, only the kitchen light was still on. He carried the suitcase. I saw him holding a long gun with a scope. The ballistics report on the .308 Winchester bullet in Lila's bones matched the type of hunting rifle Saren had registered in 1990. Laird added, "I heard him say to the woman in the house, 'I think it was Mrs. Ruth, don't call anyone, everything's decided.' Then there was a second shot, and after that, silence. When asked why he didn't report it immediately, he answered, 'I was afraid.' He had people in the local police department. I heard him say it on the phone." The prosecutor noted, "Possible local accomplice," and assigned another team to verify. After more than 3 hours, the interrogation concluded, totaling over 24 pages of testimony. Marla requested a crime scene timeline diagram based on the time markers. 1910. Lila leaves home. 2040. Saren and Laird arrive at Ashford. 2112. Black truck lights appear. 2120. Lila is injected with morphine and shot. 2140. Saren burns the body and dumps it in the lake. 22 o'clock. Vehicle leaves the area. When the markers were connected with red lines on the digital map, the entire sequence of that stormy night in 1991 emerged as a closed chain of motion, perfectly matching forensic evidence and witness accounts. The 30-page summary report was completed the same evening, concluding, Laird corroborates crime sequence. Samuel Saren killed Edward and Ruth Calderon inside residence. Incapacitated Lila with morphine injection. Executed by firearm, and ordered burning and disposal of remains at Caldera Lake. Route confirmed by witness drawing and physical evidence correlation. When the printed map was hung on the wall, the red dots glowed brightly along the route around the lake. Marla stood silently looking at it, exhaling slowly. 32 years of silence had finally taken shape, a bloody icy journey from the Calderon house to the shore of Caldera Lake, closed by 2 words in the driver's journal: burn everything. On August 14, 2023, after 7 months of comprehensive investigation, the Maine State Cold Case Unit completed the final evidence analysis phase regarding items recovered from Caldera Lake and the Ashford compound area. The Augusta Forensic Lab, under the direction of Dr. Claire Bannon, released the results of the analysis of ash and sediment samples collected during the supplemental excavation in June. The findings were shocking. Among more than 40 microsamples extracted from the northern shore sediment layers, experts identified DNA traces belonging to 12 different individuals besides Lila Calderon, all matching genetic profiles from the missing 1991 Ashford resident records. The 38-page report, sent to the state prosecutor's office and the Somerset County Sheriff, stated, evidence supports multi-victim homicide scenario. Ashford Hollow disappearance reclassified as mass murder event. The DNA samples included both males and females, with 2 clear sequences positively identified as Edward and Ruth Calderon. The remaining 10 corresponded to the Harrow, Mendez, and O'Neill households living adjacent to the Calderon residence. Chemical analysis detected residues of incomplete combustion carbon, kerosene traces, and vaporized copper-zinc compounds, consistent with bodies being burned using industrial fuel and then dumped in water. In the conclusion, Bannon wrote, thermal decomposition pattern indicates intentional cremation attempt at temperature 500–700 degrees Celsius, consistent with open-air burning on snow surface. This matched Thomas Laird's testimony about Saren bringing oil to the back of the truck, ordering the burning, then pushing the remains into the lake. The report also highlighted the exact match between the coordinates where Layla's bones were found and the area containing ash, forming a single central burn site. The forensic archaeology team measured sediment depth, determining the ash layer lay 1.3 meters below the surface, with deposition timing corresponding to the winter of 1991 based on oxygen isotope data. All evidence combined proved Caldera Lake was the site of mass body disposal, not just a single murder. Marla Quinn received the report at 9 a.m. She sat in her Greenville office, reading each line slowly, hands gripping the folder tightly. On the final summary page, the bold text read, cause of death probable firearm and morphine overdose, multiple victims. Primary suspect Samuel Saren, accessory Thomas Laird. Case 23, NISI 0217, investigation phase concluded. She looked up at the wall map, where 17 red pins marked the old Ashford houses now faded from existence. A thin line connected each pin, converging on Caldera Lake in a spiral like the eye of a storm. She requested the technical team reconstruct a full 3D crime model from the Calderon house, where blood was found under the floor, along the truck route to the burn site, ash location, and bone discovery points. When the image appeared on screen, the 32-year timeline finally closed. 1910, Lila leaves home. 2040, Saren arrives. 21 o'clock. Edward is shot. 2112, truck lights appear. 2120, Leela is injected with morphine and executed. 2130, 2145, mass burning of bodies. 22 o'clock. Vehicle leaves the scene. Under the notes section, Marla wrote in blue ink, "Sequence verified. Prosecutor Graves convened an emergency meeting to announce the official investigation conclusion." In the Augusta meeting room, representatives from forensics, police, and prosecution signed the joint protocol. Ashford Hollow case constitutes premeditated multiple homicide committed by Samuel Sarin, with assistance from Thomas Laird, and unidentified accomplice. Motive, land acquisition, and elimination of witnesses. As the final line was read, Marla felt the room fall completely silent. Only the hum of the air conditioner remaining. All the fragments, calendar page, silver bracelet, bloodstains, journal, hair strand, had finally come together into a complete picture. Sarin wanted the land around Caldera Lake, was refused by Edward Calderon, leading to a violent confrontation that ended in the massacre of the entire Ashford community to erase all traces and seize ownership of the forest. In his final supplemental statement, Laird admitted seeing flames as wide as the entire yard as they left, matching the analysis showing a burn area over 120 square meters. The investigation report concluded with a recommendation to close the police file and transfer the entire case to the state prosecutor for active charges. At 5:05 p.m. on August 14, 2023, Marla signed the final line of the file, "Investigation complete. Recommend closure." She set down the pen, stood up, and looked out the window where a light Maine rain was falling, droplets clinging to the glass, blending with the dim light of dusk. 32 years after that snowy night, the disappearance was no longer a mystery, but officially recorded as a deliberate massacre, concealed by fire, ice, and silence. As she left the office, she paused at the bulletin board where a newly posted notice read, "Ashford Hollow. Investigation phase closed." In the state's electronic archive, case code 23-0217 automatically changed status, "Active investigation closed, prosecutorial review." In the very last notes field, a small line she added herself, not per regulation but still preserved, read, "For 17 lives lost, found at last." On August 25, 2023, 11 days after the official police investigation closed, Maine State Prosecutor Allison Graves completed the preliminary indictment against defendant Thomas Laird, the only surviving person directly involved in the Ashford Hollow massacre. In her Augusta office, she sat before a table covered with thick files, reorganizing the chain of evidence spanning 3 decades, from forensic reports, journals, maps, witness statements, to DNA results, in preparation for the prosecution phase in Somerset County Court. The indictment was titled "State of Maine vs. Thomas Laird, Accessory to Multiple Homicide and Obstruction of Justice." Each page was meticulously numbered, beginning with a summary of context, the 1991 disappearance, the 2023 discovery of remains, DNA identification of 13 victims, and the deceased mastermind Samuel Sarin's role. Graves instructed her legal team to compile evidence into 4 categories: physical evidence, biological evidence, documentary evidence, and witness testimony. The physical evidence group included the silver bracelet, LC.308, Winchester bullet fragment, notebook, he said, burn everything, land debt ledger, an unsigned contract in Calderon's name. Biological evidence included DNA results from bones, hair, and ash, confirming Lila and 12 others. Documentary evidence included Laird's 1991 journal, Lieutenant Halden's 1991 investigation report, the rejected 1991 fax request to search the truck, Sarin's medical records, and morphine medical use permit. Finally, witness statements from Eileen Frost, Raymond Keene, and Laird's own confession. Each piece of evidence was individually numbered and cross-coded with electronic file 23-0217. Graves spent hours reviewing every detail to ensure the chain of custody's legal integrity, the most critical factor given that most evidence was over 30 years old. In the opening argument of the indictment, She wrote, "Although principal perpetrator Samuel Sarin is deceased, the aiding, concealment, and destruction of bodies carried out by Thomas Laird still constitute criminal offenses, as those actions directly contributed to the destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, and the prolongation of the investigation for over 3 decades. She directed the legal team to prepare Eileen Frost's testimony via video due to her advanced age, and to extract audio from Laird's original interrogation as valid self-incrimination proof." In the third section, Graves listed the reconstructed crime progression based on forensic facts. On the evening of December 21, 1991, Samuel Sarin and Thomas Laird arrived at Ashford Hollow. Sarin murdered Edward and Ruth Calderon inside the residence, incapacitated Lila Calderon with morphine, then shot her dead along with other residents, and ordered mass cremation and evidence disposal at Caldera Lake. Defendant Laird participated in transportation and assisted in body disposal, fully aware of the criminal nature of the acts. The paragraph was precisely aligned, without a single superfluous word. Graves signed the final draft at 7:18 p.m. At the same time, in the adjacent workroom, the criminal technical team completed a comparative DNA table, matching each victim to 1991 residency records for attachment. A total of 74 independent DNA samples proved connection to the Ashford compound area, printed on special paper and sealed with a red stamp. Dr. Claire Bannon's forensic results copy was attached in the appendix, confirming morphine traces and 308 gunshot wounds as consistent cause of death for at least 8 victims. When the entire file was bound in a thick black hardcover, exceeding 200 pages, Graves labeled it Exhibit Master File 23-0217. The next day, she sent official notice to Somerset County Court. The state of Maine hereby charges Thomas Laird under Sections 201 and 256 of Maine Criminal Code. The notice initiated formal proceedings, scheduling the preliminary hearing for October 2023. In preparation, Graves listed 18 witnesses, including Marla Quinn, Claire Bannon, and 3 forensic technicians. She also requested restoration of a portion of the original 1991 cassette tape, recorded by Halden, to illustrate the delayed investigation process. Before leaving the office, Graves opened the case map hanging on the wall, where red pins connected from the Calderon house to Caldera Lake. She added a small note beneath it in black ink, for those who were silenced. Then she turned off the light, leaving only the faint blue glow from the computer screen displaying the final line in digital file 23-0217. Evidence review complete. Indictment ready. That night, a light rain fell over Augusta. Wind whistled through the courthouse corridors, and in the quiet room, the thick file rested in a steel safe awaiting trial, where justice, though 32 years delayed, was finally brought into the light. On December 4, 2023, more than 3 decades after the blizzard night that caused the entire Ashford Hollow community to vanish, the trial of State of Maine v. Thomas Laird officially opened at Maine Superior Court in Augusta. The courthouse was under heavy security, with dozens of reporters and local residents lining up outside in the biting cold morning, waiting for the opening of what was considered the largest criminal case in the state's history. Inside the courtroom, white light shone down on the defendant's table, where Thomas Laird sat between 2 defense attorneys, dressed in a gray prison uniform, gaunt, his hair completely white. On the opposite side, the prosecution table was led by Allison Graves, flanked by Detective Marla Quinn, and Dr. Claire Bannon, representing the Augusta Forensic Lab. At 9 a.m., Chief Justice Harold McIntyre entered, struck the gavel 3 times, and declared the jury selection process underway. The process lasted all morning, with 42 candidates interviewed. Ultimately, 12 were selected, 7 men and 5 women, ages 30 to 60, with no criminal records and no connection to the Ashford area. At 11:45 a.m., the judge declared the jury officially impaneled, its duty to determine whether the defendant was guilty as an accomplice and concealer in the Ashford Hollow massacre. After a short lunch recess, Prosecutor Graves opened her presentation, her voice clear and measured, each sentence ringing in the dead silent room. 32 years ago, 17 people vanished from the map of Maine. Today we are here because of one who survived, the one who remained silent all that time. She presented a summary of the entire investigation, from the 2023 discovery of the LC silver bracelet to Laird's confession, emphasizing his role in helping Samuel Sarin hide bodies, destroy evidence, and obstruct justice. The large screen behind her displayed images from Caldera Lake, bone fragments, the bracelet, and the route map Laird had drawn. Graves pointed at the image and said, "This is no longer a disappearance. This is intentional, planned crime, covered up by silence." She then introduced the first piece of evidence, Dr. Claire Bannon's forensic report. The doctor took the stand, presenting the DNA analysis results, confirming that ash and bone samples from Caldera Lake contained genetic markers of 13 victims, including Edward, Ruth, and Lila Calderon. She explained in a professional yet deeply emotional tone, "There can be no mistake. Sample E06 matches Lila Calderon perfectly. The other samples prove this was a mass murder event." The jury listened intently, some took notes. Graves continued with the second exhibit, Laird's F-31 journal, displayed in its original form inside a humidity-controlled case. She read aloud the deeply etched pencil line, "He said, burn everything." The courtroom fell utterly silent, only the court clerk's pen scratching. Graves continued, "This is not imagined writing. This is a recorded order, an order to kill and erase traces." Next, the prosecution played the audio from Laird's June 27 interrogation, in which he admitted helping Sarin burn the bodies and dump them in the lake. His trembling voice filled the room. "He told me to get the oil. I just followed orders. I didn't know it was her inside." Graves turned to the jury and asked, "He says I didn't know, but after 32 years he did know, and he stayed silent. Is that innocence?" Defense counsel objected, arguing the confession was made under unstable psychological conditions, but the judge overruled, citing a legally conducted interrogation with counsel present. In the afternoon, the prosecution presented additional 1991 evidence photos, a red fabric scrap, a calendar page. Sarin's visit, 8 p.m., and photographs of the black Freightliner, taken in Sarin's garage in 2023. Each image appeared on the large screen, cross-referenced with Eileen Frost's statement about seeing truck lights at 9:12 p.m. Graves stated, "Witnesses, physical evidence and timeline data match perfectly." When she mentioned Frost's name, the courtroom went quiet. Due to her frail health, her testimony had been pre-recorded and was played live. Her voice trembling but clear, "I saw those lights. I counted every second. 9:12 p.m. I still remember." The screen light reflected on the jurors' faces. Many leaned forward, eyes fixed on the footage. Graves then submitted the route map Laird drew in red ink, and the 3D crime scene model constructed by Marla Quinn. She said, "This is the map of death. The road from the Calderon house to Caldera Lake, proven by facts, not speculation." The evidence presentation lasted until nearly 5 p.m. As Graves concluded her opening statement, she looked around the room, voice lowering. "Justice has no expiration date, but justice always returns." Judge McIntyre declared a recess, instructing the jury to keep all discussions confidential until the following day. As everyone rose, the sunset light streamed through the window frames, falling across the defendant's table, where Laird sat with his head bowed, hands trembling slightly. Outside the courthouse, the season's first snow fell in scattered flakes, and in front of the main entrance, a small new sign had been erected bearing the words, "State of Maine v. Thomas Laird, Trial Day 1. In the cold wind, it creaked, the sound echoing like the opening notes of the final chapter in a case that had haunted Maine for 32 years. On the morning of December 5, 2023, the trial entered its second day, focusing on the examination of witnesses and the presentation of forensic evidence. In the tense atmosphere of the courtroom, Prosecutor Allison Graves began by calling the first witness, Dr. Claire Bannon, director of the Maine State Forensic Laboratory, who oversaw the entire chain of DNA and chemical analysis in the Ashford Hollow case. Dr. Bannon took the stand, wearing a white lab coat under a black blazer, holding a thick file of documents. After being sworn in, she described the examination process from February to August 2023, explaining in detail how DNA samples were extracted from bones, ashes, and hair recovered from Caldera Lake. We successfully identified a total of 13 complete genomes, she stated clearly, her voice calm, including Layla, Edward, and Ruth Calderon, along with 10 other residents. There was no misidentification. All matched the 1991 Ashford Hollow demographic records. The screen behind her displayed matching green and red DNA sequences, each pair showing perfect alignment. Graves asked, "Can you tell us about the cause of death?" Bannon replied, "We found 308 Winchester gunshot wounds and traces of morphine in the bones of the female victim identified as Layla Calderon. The morphine dosage was sufficient to induce deep coma within minutes. This indicates the victim was injected before being shot." Defense counsel objected, arguing the evidence could not identify who administered the injection, but Bannon answered firmly, "We recovered a syringe and morphine vial of the exact type from Samuel Saren's residence. No one else had legal access to that drug in the Millinocket area at the time of 1991. She concluded with a concise statement, "Science does not lie. Time may blur memory, but it cannot erase genetic traces." As she stepped down, the jury collectively took notes, several nodding. Graves next called witness Eileen Frost, her testimony presented via video due to her health preventing travel. On the large screen, the 89-year-old woman appeared in a brightly lit room, her voice trembling but clear. "I saw that truck, white headlights, stopped in front of the Calderon house at 9:12 p.m. I remember because my wall clock had just chimed." Graves asked, "Do you have any doubt about who owned that vehicle?" Eileen looked directly into the camera. "It belonged to Mr. Saren. I had seen that exact type of truck at his lumber yard many times. I'm certain." When the video ended, the courtroom fell silent for several seconds. Defense counsel objected, arguing that 30-year-old visual memory could be unreliable, but Graves submitted comparative photographs of the black Freightliner truck taken in Saren's garage in 2023. Both images were displayed side by side. The angle and headlight positioning matched perfectly. The jury exchanged glances, no one speaking. Next, the prosecution called crime scene technician Thomas Reed, from 2023, who personally discovered blood traces under the Calderon house floor using luminol. He described in detail, "We found 7 positive reaction areas, forming a drag path from the dining table to the back door. The DNA matched samples from Layla Calderon. There is no doubt, this was the site of violent activity." As he presented 3D crime scene images, the blue luminol glow appeared on screen like frozen streaks of light, plunging the room into absolute silence. Graves stated, "This is real blood, not supposition." The prosecution then called Marla Quinn, lead investigator of the reopened case. She reviewed the evidence discovery process and Thomas Laird's statements from finding the journal entry. He said, "Burn everything to the route map for transporting the bodies." An electronic map displayed behind her, with a red line connecting the Calderon house to Caldera Lake. "All facts, time, location, witnesses, physical evidence, align perfectly," she said. "And every path leads to the same person, Samuel Saren." Defense counsel attempted a counterattack, asking, "Do you have any direct evidence showing the defendant fired a gun or burned the bodies?" Marla replied calmly, "Yes, his own admission." Mr. Laird confessed to pouring fuel and burning on Saren's orders, thereby becoming a participant in the criminal act. The statement caused a stir in the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel for order. Graves concluded the evidence phase by playing an audio excerpt from the June interrogation, Laird's hoarse, almost whispered voice saying, "He told me to burn everything." The words echoed through the speakers, lingering in the air. After the recording ended, Graves turned to the jury and spoke slowly. No one else was in that house that night, except them. But we have blood traces, bullets, drugs, and the words of the man who carried it out. That is the truth. At 4:35 p.m., the judge declared the second day of trial concluded, noting that the forensic and witness presentation had been completed. Outside in Augusta, fine snow began to fall, the flakes touching the courtroom windows and melting into cold droplets, like fragments of time remaining from the winter of 1991, now turned into undeniable evidence of guilt. On the morning of December 6, 2023, the trial moved into its third day, with the most anticipated moment, the direct testimony of defendant Thomas Laird. The entire courtroom fell silent as two officers escorted him to the witness stand. Laird appeared older than his years, face gaunt, eyes sunken, voice raspy from many sleepless nights. After being sworn in, he sat down, hands clasped tightly on the wooden table. Prosecutor Allison Graves began with a clear question. Mr. Laird, do you admit to being present at Ashford Hollow on the night of December 21, 1991? He raised his head slowly. Yes, I drove the truck for Mr. Sarin, and I was there. Graves pressed further. And did you know he was carrying a weapon? I knew, he answered, voice low. I saw the rifle in the case, the hunting rifle he always used. The room buzzed. The jury leaned forward. Graves continued. Did you see him use that weapon? Laird nodded, eyes closed. Yes, I heard 2 gunshots inside the Calderon house, then saw him come out with blood on his clothes. I didn't dare ask. At the lake, he fired one more shot into the girl, Lila. Graves asked, did you assist him in disposing of the bodies? He hesitated for a few seconds, then said softly, I followed orders. I brought the fuel, poured it. I didn't think. I just wanted to live. The final sentence caused many in the courtroom to bow their heads. No one spoke. The prosecutor took a sealed evidence bag containing the F-31 notebook from the table and opened it in front of the defendant. Did you write this line? He nodded. He said, burn everything. I wrote it that same night, to remember that I had done something I shouldn't have. Graves continued. When you wrote it, did you understand what everything meant? I understand now, he said. It meant everyone. All of them. Defense counsel stood and objected, requesting a recess due to the defendant showing strong emotional distress, but Judge McIntyre overruled, allowing the prosecution to proceed. Graves asked, were you paid to stay silent? Laird looked straight ahead. Yes, he gave me $200 and promised more when things settled. I never got the rest, only the accident later. The prosecution requested display of Sarin's accounting ledger photo found in the garage, entry of $200 on December 22, 1991, note, delivery night. She turned to the jury, not just words. This is documented payment for silence. Graves then shifted to the accomplice charge. Did you voluntarily follow Sarin? No, he replied. He threatened to fire me, said if I talked, he'd pin it on me. Graves pressed, but you still drove, still poured fuel, still stayed silent for 32 years. Did you have the opportunity to report to the police? He admitted, voice shaking. I did, but I wasn't brave enough. I've carried the guilt ever since. She paused, then asked one final question. Did you know that remaining silent and helping burn the bodies was a criminal act, amounting to being an accessory to murder? Laird nodded, eyes welling up. I know now, and I accept it. Graves turned to the judge. There is no doubt regarding accomplice liability. The defendant admits to participating in body disposal, receiving payment to conceal the crime, and knowing the nature of his actions. Defense counsel rose, trying to redirect, asking Laird, were you so afraid of Sarin that you lost the ability to resist? Yes, he said. He had people in the police. I believed that. If I talked, I'd be dead too. Counsel concluded. Your Honor, the defendant was a victim of coercion, not a principal. Graves immediately objected. Coercion does not last 30 years. His silence did not save anyone. It only buried the crime deeper. The judge banged the gavel for order. Graves approached the evidence table, opened the crime scene map, and pointed to the red line from the Calderon house to Caldera Lake. "This is the route Mr. Laird drew," she said. "No one else knew those details, except the people in that truck that night. We cannot call this coercion. This was a conscious, chosen action." The jury remained silent, eyes following each line on the map. Marla Quinn sat in the back row, watching Laird, the man who once held the key to this story, trembling on the stand. When questioning concluded, Graves asked the final question: "If you could go back to that night, what would you do differently?" Laird answered, voice choked. "I wouldn't drive. I would call the police. But it's too late now. I just want to say to those still alive that I'm sorry." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Only the scratch of the court reporter's pen audible. The judge declared a 15-minute recess before moving to closing arguments. As officers led Laird away, sunlight streamed through the window, falling on the wooden table where the small notebook still lay open to the scrawled words. He said, "Burn everything," the line that became the focal point of the trial, and the final piece of evidence binding him to the guilt he could not escape for 32 years. On December 14, 2023, after 10 days of intense trial and 2 days of closed deliberation, the Maine Superior Court read the final verdict in the case. State of Maine vs. Thomas Laird. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with reporters, former investigators, and residents from Greenville, Somerset, and Millinocket, places where the name Ashford Hollow had become a symbol of 3 decades of haunting. At 9:03 a.m., Judge Harold McIntyre entered, banged the gavel, and called for order. Thomas Laird was brought from holding, hands still cuffed, eyes deeply sunken, face gaunt, as if he had lost all feeling. The 12 jurors stood in a row. The foreperson read their decision on behalf of the group. His voice rang out, clear, neither slow nor hurried. "We, the jury of the state of Maine, after considering all evidence, testimony, and arguments from both sides, conclude that defendant Thomas Laird is guilty of accomplice liability in aiding and concealing multiple murders in the Ashford Hollow case. We find the defendant guilty on all counts." A murmur spread through the room, then silence. Judge McIntyre nodded, jotted a few quick notes, and looked directly at the defendant. "Mr. Laird," he said, in a grave, but not harsh tone. "For 32 years, what you called silence became shackles for this entire community. You helped another bury 17 lives, and the trust of an entire region. Though you did not pull the trigger, you held the wheel of the vehicle that carried them to their deaths." Laird bowed his head, hands clenched, showing no reaction. McIntyre continued, "The court acknowledges your cooperation during the investigation, but that cannot erase the fact that your actions helped sustain the crime for more than 3 decades. Therefore, pursuant to Section 201 of the Maine Criminal Code, the court sentences Thomas Laird to life imprisonment without parole, to be served at the Waldo County Correctional Facility, High Security Facility. Sentence effective immediately." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing throughout the room. A few in the gallery began to cry. Others sat motionless, hands tightly clasped. Allison Graves closed her file, eyes still on the defendant, expression calm rather than triumphant. Marla Quinn, in the back row, felt both relief and heaviness at once. The 11-month journey from the discovery of the silver ring LC to this moment had come to an end. As officers led Laird away, he glanced back once, his eyes a mix of regret and exhaustion. Reporters captured the image. The next morning's Portland Press Herald headline read, "Thomas Laird sentenced to life. Maine's longest cold case, finally resolved." In her statement to the press, Graves said briefly, "No verdict can bring them back, but justice never sleeps. Today, it has just awakened." Outside the courthouse, snow fell heavily, wind whipping the white ribbons tied along the fence, placed there by Somerset residents in memory of the 17 victims. A young woman, a grandniece of the Calderon family, held an old photo of Lila and stood silently, tears mingling with melting snow. In the 42-page judgment released that day, the judge's final remarks stated clearly, "The guilt of silence is no less than the guilt of the one who fired the gun. Without the hands that carried, concealed, burned, and hid, there would not have been 32 years of grief." McIntyre signed in black ink, his handwriting slightly trembling but legible. At 11:40 a.m., the police convoy took Laird out of Augusta. He looked out the window at snow-covering streets, roofs, and farther away, the dark forest where Caldera Lake once lay. No one knew what he was thinking, only that his lips moved, as if whispering something only he could hear. The convoy turned onto I-95 and disappeared into the sleet. Meanwhile, at Maine Cold Case Unit headquarters, Marla stood before the case map on the wall, removing the old red pins and replacing them with small black ribbons. She wrote the final entry in the internal log, Case 23-0217, closed by court verdict. The court, prosecution, police, and forensics, all relevant agencies, signed off on file completion. The Ashford Hollow case, after more than 32 years, officially ended with one sentence: life imprisonment without parole for the man who drove death through the Maine snow of 1991. On December 21, 2023, exactly 32 years after the night of the Ashford Hollow massacre, the Maine Superior Court held a special posthumous hearing in Augusta regarding Samuel Sarin, the man who died in 2018 but was determined to be the primary orchestrator of the Ashford Hollow murders. There was no defendant present, only legacy and truth. The smaller courtroom was solemn, attended only by prosecution representatives, counsel for the Sarin estate, victims' relatives, and investigators. Judge Harold McIntyre, who had sentenced Thomas Laird a week earlier, opened with brief remarks, "Justice does not stop at death." Without Samuel Sarin, there would be no case. Prosecutor Allison Graves presented a summary file, physical, financial, and testimonial evidence confirming Sarin planned to seize Ashford land, murdered all residents to eliminate ownership claims, and directed body disposal. All evidence included Laird's journal, land debt records, unsigned transfer contracts, and Sarin Timber and Company accounting logs showing motive and intent. She stated, though he is deceased, Maine law still allows posthumous criminal responsibility determination to clarify the case's nature and permit forfeiture of assets derived from crime. During the presentation, Graves quoted the final forensic conclusion, "No other suspect, all lines of action originate from Sarin." The court summoned representatives from the Finance Department and Land Registry to confirm Sarin Timber and Company is continued ownership of 420 hectares of forest surrounding Caldera Lake. Under Section 1742 of the Maine Property Code, the entire area was designated property acquired through criminal means. The prosecution requested transfer to a public trust fund to memorialize Ashford Hollow victims and support cold case forensic research. The Sarin family attorney did not object, requesting only that the main house be preserved as an educational historic site. The judge approved, entering into the record, all assets, including timber rights, Sarin Timber and Company, remaining accounts, and related real property, shall be forfeited and transferred to the state of Maine. The Maine Sarin estate residents will become part of the Memorial Trust. After the prosecution finished, McIntyre read the ruling based on scientific evidence, witness testimony, and investigative conclusions. The court confirms Samuel Sarin as the mastermind, organizer, and director of the multiple murders at Ashford Hollow on the night of December 21, 1991. Though the subject is deceased, this ruling is issued to restore honor to the victims and close the file with full truth. In legal history, this is a rare but necessary case. Crime does not die with its perpetrator. He signed firmly, handwriting steady. The courtroom clock read 11:12 a.m. The same moment, snow began falling outside the window. After the ruling, Graves outlined plans for the new fund, Ashford Memorial Trust, formed from Sarin's forfeited assets, valued at approximately $7.8 million. The fund, managed by the state of Maine, would allocate 60% to build a memorial at Ashford Hollow, 25% to train cold case investigators, and 15% to scholarships named after Lila Calderon for forensic science students. When she finished, the room was quiet, then filled with soft applause, not for victory, but for closure. In his notes, Judge McIntyre wrote, "Samuel Sarand, deceased, convicted posthumously of orchestrating the Ashford Hollow massacre." He paused, looked around the room, where several victims' relatives held old photographs. A middle-aged woman, the niece of the O'Neill family, approached, placed a white carnation on the evidence table, and said softly, "Now they can rest." Outside, reporters stood in the snow, capturing images of Prosecutor Graves and Marla Quinn leaving together. Behind them, a freshly posted sign on the courthouse board read, "State of Maine Superior Court, Posthumous Conviction, Samuel Sarand." In the dim winter noon light, the black letters stood out sharply against the white background, marking the absolute end of a case once buried in ice. That same day, the asset forfeiture order was sent to the Finance Department, and the official file was updated to final status, primary suspect. Deceased, adjudicated as guilty. Estate transferred to Ashford Memorial Trust. After 32 years, the Ashford Hollow case finally delivered judgment for both the living and the dead, leaving nothing hidden beneath the snow. Following the posthumous ruling on December 21, 2023, the entire state of Maine experienced an unprecedented wave of strong reactions since the Ashford Hollow case was reopened. Local media ran front-page coverage, "The Winter Crime of 1991. Justice arrives after 32 years." Hundreds of residents from Somerset, Millinocket, and Greenville gathered at the former Ashford compound site, where the state had erected a temporary wooden sign reading, "Ashford Memorial, for the 17 lost." At the first memorial ceremony, relatives placed flowers and lit candles around Caldera Lake, golden light flickering on the icy water like a belated prayer. Schools and universities across the state held seminars on the case, treating it as a model of modern cold case investigation and forensic ethics. Online, journalist Eli Dorsey's podcast, The Hollow Remains, the first to revive the case in 2021, reached over 10 million listens in just 2 weeks, with the final episode, Ashford Truth in the Snow, topping national charts. Dozens of investigative reports and documentaries were produced, many focusing on Detective Marla Quinn's and Prosecutor Allison Graves' journeys. Major outlets such as The Atlantic and The New York Times published in-depth features, calling it one of the coldest cases ever solved using the oldest DNA evidence in the United States. In Greenville, authorities installed new road signs on Route 15 reading Caldera Memorial Trail, dedicated 2023. The event sparked nationwide discussion about evidence storage responsibility and the importance of forensic technology in solving cold cases. Public opinion viewed the case not merely as a local crime, but as a reminder of perseverance and memory. As winter once again blanketed Caldera Lake in snow, Ashford Hollow was no longer a place of mystery, but a symbol of resurrected justice, where ice melted to reveal truth. On the evening of December 21, 2023, exactly 32 years after the disappearance of the 17 Ashford Hollow residents, the official memorial ceremony was held at Caldera Lake, now officially renamed Lila's Lake by Maine State resolution. From afternoon onward, groups of people arrived carrying flowers, photos, and white ribbons. The area around the lake was enclosed by oak fencing. Under soft yellow lights, shrouded in mist, the still water reflected the winter sky. The Maine state flag hung heavily in the cold wind. Along the path to the shore, 17 glass candle holders formed an arc, each representing one victim, 13 adults, 4 children. Their names were engraved on small bronze plaques attached to stones, glowing in the flickering candlelight. At the center stood a large monument inscribed, Ashford Hollow Memorial, in memory of the 17 lost, found at last. The ceremony was presided over by Prosecutor Allison Graves, attended by Detective Marla Quinn, Dr. Claire Bannon, and surviving relatives of the Calderon, O'Neill, Mendez, and Harrow families. Hundreds of local residents stood silently around the lake, many unable to hold back tears as the memorial music played, violin notes blending with wind through the pine forest, creating a sound both chilling and serene. Graves spoke briefly. For the past 32 years, this place was shrouded in darkness and silence. Today, the light from these candles will never go out. Justice cannot erase loss, but it can bring peace. When she finished, Marla stepped forward and placed the 17th candle for Lila Calderon in the ark. She said nothing, only bowed her head for a long moment, then laid the silver ring engraved LC, discovered in 2023, now cleaned and sealed in clear glass, on the stone monument. The light reflected across the lake like a small glowing trail drifting away. A local priest offered a prayer, "May they, those who left in that snowy night, rest in peace, where water and ice become one." When he concluded, attendees stepped forward to light candles, place flowers, then stepped back in silence. Everyone's breath mingled with the cold, forming a faint mist over the water. In the distance, Somerset school students held a white banner reading, "Never Forgotten." On a temporary platform, a screen replayed images of the case through the years, from a 1991 black and white photo of the Calderon family, the Caldera Lake map, to courtroom scenes from December. As the final melody played, a boy, the son of an O'Neill victim, stepped forward and read the 17 names in a trembling yet firm voice. With each name, a candle burned brighter, unmoved by the wind. Marla stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the candlelight spread across the lake, recalling every detail in the file: hair strand, calendar page, blood trace, scrawled words. He said, "Burn everything." All had become evidence, no longer mystery. Allison Graves approached her and said softly, "We brought them back." Marla replied, "No one truly comes back, but at least now they are not forgotten." At the end of the ceremony, the bell from the small nearby church rang 17 times, each toll for one lost life. As the final chime faded into the wind, fine snow began to fall. The flakes landed on the candles, but did not extinguish them, blending with the golden light reflected on the dark water, as if their souls lingered somewhere around the lake. At 9:12 p.m., the exact time the truck headlights appeared in 1991, all electric lights around the lake were turned off, leaving only the 17 candles burning quietly amid the white snow. People joined hands in a circle and observed 1 minute of silence. Afterward, Graves declared, "The Ashford Hollow case file is officially closed. All records will be permanently archived with the state of Maine, marking the largest cold case ever resolved." The entire crowd bowed their heads. As the ceremony ended, wind blew through, the last candle tilted, a spark fell into the water, dissolved into a tiny light, then vanished. But on the shore, the bronze plaque still shone in the moonlight, serving as final proof that justice, though late, found its way through the ice to touch memory. The story of the Ashford Hollow case, beginning with the blizzard night of 1991, and concluding with the memorial ceremony on December 21, 2023, is not merely a tale of solving a crime, but also a mirror reflecting modern American society, where justice may arrive late but still exists. 32 years of silence, a forgotten hair in an evidence box, the scrawled words, he said, "Burn everything," or headlights at 9:12 p.m. All remind us that small details, if preserved, can save an entire truth. In today's American society, where trust in institutions sometimes wavers, this story underscores the value of perseverance and personal responsibility. If in 1991, the Somerset Police had not hastily closed the file, if someone had not overlooked sample E06 hair, perhaps the 17 people of Ashford would have received justice 3 decades earlier. That lesson is especially important in the current context, when citizens, journalists, and public agencies must together maintain transparency, preserve data, and respect truth, no matter how small. The images of Detective Marla Quinn and Prosecutor Allison Graves represent the new generation of American investigators People who believe in technology, but also in human memory, where every clue matters. In everyday life, we can learn from them that truth does not vanish on its own. It only waits for those brave enough to reclaim it. Whether in law, journalism, or personal life, the most important thing is to never stay silent in the face of wrong, because silence, as Thomas Laird proved, can sometimes be the greatest crime. Justice may come slowly, but when it arrives, it reminds the entire society that America is strongest not because of power, but because of its capacity for self-correction. If you believe that justice, even when delayed, still deserves to be remembered, please subscribe to the channel to join us in continuing to explore the cold cases that changed America. Thank you for following the Ashford Hollow journey. See you in the next video, where another mystery awaits to be uncovered between darkness and truth.